22nd. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under
indivisible
with liberty and justice for all.
A little bit of stereo action there with folks online. Thank you. So yes, we'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to recognize that today's meeting takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Cheryl, would you be so kind as to let folks know about closed captioning and any other logistics?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. If you are joining us for this meeting virtually today, instructions for turning on closed captioning are on your screen. If you are joining us in person, we will have closed captioning on all the screens here in the Sophie Moise room. There will be opportunity to speak during the meeting for public comment virtually and in person. We ask that all speakers today speak slowly and clearly. This helps with the accuracy of the closed captioning. If you are on Microsoft Teams, if you would like to speak when discussion has been open for public comment, we ask that you use the raise hand feature. This is the small hand button. If you are calling in on the phone, you will need to hit *5 to raise your hand. Once called upon, you will need to hit *6 to unmute. If you have any questions, please find me during the meeting and let me know. We also have assisted listening devices. If you would like one, please find me during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, we have public comment on items not on the agenda. And so for those of you who are new to these sorts of meetings, if you're here for a specific agenda item, one of the public hearings listed, you'll have an opportunity at that point in time during the meeting to comment on that item. This is the point in time to comment on anything that is not on the agenda, but preferably still within the jurisdiction of Missoula County government. So if anyone is here or online, let's begin in the room. Is there anyone who would like to comment on an item not on the agenda? How about online? Okay, moving on. Our claims list for this public meeting, and this would be claims received by the Commissioner's Office between January 31st, 2024 and February 13th, 2024, totals $3,621,271.87. If folks are interested in the detailed list of claims, you can go to the electronic agenda, click on that item, and it will bring up the full list of items listed on the claims list. We have a number of public hearings today and pretty good turnout here. I'm guessing there's probably at least one item that's going to capture the lion's share of folks' comments today, but maybe I'm wrong on that. The way this is going to work, since there are a lot of folks and we've got a lot of business to attend to today, for each of these public hearings, we will open with a staff report from Missoula County staff giving an overview of what it is that we're going to be considering. That will be followed by a presentation by the applicant or the applicant's representative. We will then open it up for public comment. At that point in time, if you're online, you'll use the raise hand function and I'll call on you in the order in which you raise your hand. If you're in the room, come on up to the microphone if it's empty. If you guys want to queue up in the middle of the room, sorry about the pillar blocking the view in the middle of the room, but you can do so. I would ask folks to please be respectful of one another. Try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. I might be actually using one of these handy dandy hourglasses to help remind you of where your time lies. Keep your comments short and succinct. If someone else has already said exactly what you want to say, no need to repeat everything. You can simply say, I agree with the previous speakers, and that will be satisfactory. When we get to the final public hearing related to Western Materials gravel pit use variance, I'll have some more specific instructions for you at that point because the public hearing process is a little bit different and unique for that one. But I think with that, we will roll right into our business. Our first public hearing, which I'll open, is on the Grand Am Way petition. And this is brought to us by Patrick Swart.
Hello, I'm Patrick Swart with the Clerk and Recorder's Office. And the Clerk and Recorder's Office has received a petition to abandon a county right-of-way described as Grand Am Way from its intersection with Roller Coaster Road southerly to its terminus. The petition has been signed by at least 10 freeholders of the road district, and the petition fee has been paid in full. Additionally, a notice of hearing has been published twice in the Missoulian, and all affected property owners have been notified. The petition is now presented to you to hear public comment, and then as well as on the record, set those dates for the road viewing and second hearings. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anyone here or online who would like to comment on the petition? Okay, who is the lucky soul who gets to go on the tour?
I was just going to ask you that, Dave. Who?
I don't know.
I don't think it was me because I haven't done one in quite a while.
It'll be Josh, and
Oh, there you go.
the road viewing is on March 7th,
All right, off we
and the
go.
second hearing is on March 14th.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
The road viewing is at 10 o'clock in the morning.
So if anyone here in the room or online would like to drop in for the road viewing, it is again, what's the day and time, Cheryl?
It's on March 7th
At
at
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Okay, and if folks from the public want more details on where to rendezvous for that, if they want to participate, who would they contact?
They can contact me, Cheryl Hartman.
Okay, there we have it. All right, thank you. We will move on to our second public hearing, which I will open. And as far as that last one goes, since there will be a subsequent public hearing, if folks want to submit comments on that petition, that road abandonment petition, they can do so in writing or come to our next public hearing and offer testimony. We will now move on to the Holt Ranch subdivision, proposed subdivision, and Tim Worley will present the staff report.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Worley with Planning, Development, and Sustainability. And this is the Holt Ranch subdivision, which is a proposal by Ramona Holt, represented by John Kellogg of PCI. The 71-acre parcel is located about 2.5 miles west of Lolo. The lots will be 22.8 acres and 42.39 acres respectively. The 2002 Lolo Regional Plan recommends residential uses at a density of 1 home per 5 acres for the majority of the property, and there's a small area of open and resource. And on the eastern edge of the property, there's some area that's considered area of significant flood risk, which is just a category in the Lolo Regional Plan. And I'll describe the flood issues here in just a bit. The zoning that covers the majority of the property is a Part 1 district. It's ZD 44, the Sleeman Gulch zoning district, which is a 1 home per 2.5 acre density district. And the new home on the easternmost lot will be subject to zoning compliance review under these district standards. This is a former ranch property. This is actually a sort of a remaining tract of the larger Holt Ranch property. Longhorn Flat subdivision was developed several years ago immediately to the west. Agriculture is expected to continue on the property. We do have one recommended condition regarding an irrigation diversion. We're recommending a 20-foot easement so that the second lot has access to the water right on the property and the water. Roads on the property, Highway 12 provides access to this property, and there's an existing driveway that serves the existing ranch home on the westernmost lot. The access for the eastern lot is shown by this white arrow here. I'll put a bead on it here. There is actually a structure to the north that's served by a roughly 500-foot long access drive, which will also serve presumably the home on lot 22B. We do have a recommended condition to build this to an 18-foot wide road standard for its entire length. That's per the subdivision regulations requirement. The alternative is to demonstrate that the road may be terminated short of the lot boundary through an approved zoning compliance permit for a home. Let's see, let's go back one here. So if within the 3-year preliminary plat approval period, a home comes in for a permit, they would only have to build this shorter section of 18-foot wide road starting at Highway 12 and terminating roughly here. This is just an illustration. And I do have some language that provides basically a third alternative, and it's the underlying language which you see here for condition 8. If the new dwelling on lot 22B is approved after filing of the plat, the letter of credit or other security may be adjusted to account for the shorter road lengths. So there's basically 3 options. Build a 500-foot long road, put up a bond that you later can adjust, or bring in a permit that shows how long that drive is going to be. There is some floodplain on the eastern portion of the property, and this is Sleeman Creek Zone A FEMA floodplain. There was a flood study conducted to assess risk to dwellings and access, and it showed a much smaller location of water inundation that shouldn't affect the access point on Highway 12. So we do have a recommended condition that either the applicant file a letter of map revision so that the floodplain map reflects this area of inundation, or show the existing Zone A floodplain on the final plat. Other conditions relate to the filing of covenants regarding issues such as fire-rated roofing. This is in the wildland urban interface, and it's a fairly high fire danger in this location. Defensible space guidelines should be included in those covenants. The fire sprinkler requirement for the second home should be included in those covenants, as well as weed management information. So staff's recommendation is for approval. And commissioners, there's your motion, and I'll be available if you have any questions. And I believe John Kellogg is joining us remotely today.
John, would you like to present?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. I apologize for not being there in person, but I'm in the middle of a public hearing in Hamilton right now. So I appreciate Tim's staff report. Essentially, we're dividing up a very large tract into 2 slightly smaller tracts. The Holt Ranch is on the westerly large tract, and the easterly tract is intended to be deeded by Ramona Holt to the museum, the Holt Museum, and so that deeding to the museum is intended to provide an ability to finance future improvements to that museum. We're in agreement with the staff report, with possibly the one exception on roadway. The conditions started out that the roadway that provides access for this easterly lot is shared with the roadway that goes to lot 23B. And Tim has explained that fairly well, that it will, thank you, that at the present time, we do not have a proposed building site. We've got numerous potential, and actually we've got building sites that previously been approved through DEQ. However, we do not have a specific building site proposed for this development, and it's very probable that we won't have any building occurring in the near future. So I would prefer a condition that can be triggered by someone obtaining a home building permit on that property, because I can see if we do a letter of credit to apply to that, I can see over the term of the letter of credit that no building will be constructed and the letter of credit will expire and accomplish not what is really intended. So yesterday, I sent a letter that Ramona Holt had prepared regarding her intention for this property. And Tim, are you able to bring that up?
Let me see if I can find it, John.
I apologize, I don't have it easily in hand here. If, Tim, I don't want to hold up the hearing if, oh, there, okay. So Ramona explains that the long-range plan is for Lot 22B to be transferred to the nonprofit Holt Heritage Center, along with some other holdings. So there is no immediate plan for a building permit or a building location on the property. And if there were a way of triggering the shared road construction requirement to a future building permit, that would be more acceptable, I'm sure, to the Holts and more appropriate, I believe.
Anything else, John?
That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And before we open this up for public comment, how about we get some clarification from our legal counsel here or Tim regarding what John just proposed?
I considered, John and I have been talking about this for a few days, and I think the challenge, we could work out language that gets to where John wants. The only problem is that it ties the construction of roadway to the end user who pulls a permit. It doesn't tie it to the plat. And technically, even though this is a private road, it's a public improvement that is tied to the filing of the plat. So we could do it. I think legally it's maybe a little tenuous, and it does put the burden on the end user. But we could engineer language that gets there. It's just that subdivision improvements are tied to the filing of the plat in most every case.
I think given that it's just two pieces of property with one owner right now, I don't feel much consternation about this compared to, let's say, there were going to be 32 different lots here. Who would the end user be? How would it work? It feels fairly, I feel like though tenuous, I feel safe as well. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, we'll hold that thought momentarily. So this is a public hearing on this proposed subdivision. Is there anyone in the room here in the courthouse who would like to offer testimony? Is there anyone online? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I guess let's have a little bit more discussion maybe on this point. John Hart, any thoughts?
Not really. I mean, I appreciate what Commissioner Slotnick is saying, that it doesn't give him much consternation. The problem with transferring the obligation for for infrastructure, that, by the way, is required by the subdivision regulations, to the ultimate end user, is that it's oftentimes, we would just need to figure out a way so it's very, very clear to anybody who is going to purchase this lot, maybe from the, you know, the Holt Center someday, it's very clear that before they can build or improve this lot, they're going to have to build this road. And I mean, conceivably, they might have to build a 500-foot road, and it's expensive today. It's going to be more expensive in the future. So I think it's possible, but it's not ideal.
So if
How
it's
long
not-
is it gonna take to have that conversation? Like, do we have to make a decision today, or can you guys get that language?
Oh, we could get you that language today. Yeah. And I think what John is,
Do
if I could make a suggestion, if we go this direction, I think we should have language at least in the covenants flagging that, and maybe on the face of the plat too. Are you thinking, John?
So yeah, that was my question. If it's not on the face of the plat, then we're depending upon some documentation in the building department, or something would need to be a trigger for someone to recognize that there's a road that needs to be completed here.
Yeah, I think those two options, in the covenants and on the face of the plat, either the planning department will see it through zoning compliance, because this lot is zoned.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Or the building division would also find it, hopefully, in conjunction. I can't wordsmith how this would work, and I'm not opposed to it. It's just, again, it's not ideal.
All right.
Commissioners,
Yeah,
if I
John.
could comment, we've got kind of an overlapping requirement also. The fire department requires that an 18-foot wide driveway be built to the building site. And this is kind of mirroring the requirement for the shared roadway. So I guess we've got at least two agencies potentially looking at this requirement, and I can't see it disappearing.
Thank you, John. So if we're wanting to include language on the face of the plat and in the covenants, how would that modify our motion?
Yeah, if I could have a couple minutes just to make sure I get my words right. I thought I could use the existing condition, but I think I need to do something a little bit different. So I think we can get there.
Okay, do we need to move on to the next item and come back to this, Tim, or?
It'll take me just a couple minutes.
Okay.
We do a 2-minute recess.
Okay, we will take a 3-minute recess, and Tim will work out the language. We'll come back, dispense with this item, and then carry on. There is a coffee shop in the hallway out there if anyone needs something.
We're ready when you are.
All right, everyone, we will come back into session. Thanks for indulging us a few moments while we, in real time, worked on language here. So Tim Worley, what do you have for us?
So what we would do is we would replace condition 8 with the following language. Plans for and construction of an 18-foot wide road from Highway 12 to the location a driveway diverges to serve a dwelling on Lot 22B shall be reviewed and approved by County Public Works prior to zoning compliance permit approval. Information about this requirement shall be placed on the plat and in the covenants, subject to PDS review and approval prior to final plat approval.
John, how does that sound?
Which John? Me?
That would be you, yes.
Okay, that sounds perfect. And I appreciate Tim's efforts and John's efforts at wordsmithing.
Okay, thank you. If you could pull up the motion again, Tim, and I'm suspecting that we just tack on the word phrase as amended to the end of it. And
Sorry, I'm overthinking it here a little bit.
there it is. All right, we've had public comment, we've had presentations. I would entertain a motion.
Here we go. I move to approve Holt Ranch subdivision based on the findings of fact in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? See none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thanks, Tim and John, for doing this on the fly.
thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
We will move on to our third public hearing on the proposed Hellgate Pines subdivision. Laura Collins will offer a staff report.
Good afternoon, everyone. So today I am presenting the proposal for a 2-lot subdivision at 14020 Hampton Drive, otherwise known as Hellgate Pines, edition number 2, block 1, lot 13. The applicant for this proposal are Eric and Ivy Pfister, and they are represented by Montana Northwest. Here is a general vicinity for this project. It is located in the Clinton-Tura area inside of the Tura Activity Circle. And it is a proposed 2-lot subdivision. The lot itself is on 2.76 acres. So it's proposed for 1.38 acres apiece. This is a re-subdivision of a residential lot from the Hellgate Pines number 2 subdivision. Both lots are proposed for residential purposes and will be served by individual septic systems. There is an existing well on the property for the current residents, and a new well is proposed for lot 13B near the front of the existing lot 13A. Primary access for the existing residents is from Hampton Drive, and the applicant proposes to add one additional approach and driveway from Hampton Drive to serve lot 13B by designating a no access strip along the southeast boundary of lot 13A. Here's some of the breakdown of the information I just covered. And here are the review criteria that the county review subdivision for: basically zoning and growth policy, public services, public health and safety, and impacts to natural environments. No adverse impacts to these review criteria were found, although I'm going to cover a few of these in more detail to add some clarification. So the property's land use designation is set by the 2002 Regional Land Use Plan. It's located in the Tura Activity Circle, which is an area designated for development. The recommended density of the area is 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. This subdivision was platted prior to the 1975 comprehensive plan that this land use designation comes from. I should also note that the lots in this subdivision are smaller than 5 acres, and that predates the recommendation. For a little more context, the subdivision to the north, Hellgate Pines number 1, in the same land use circle, is recommended 2 dwelling units per acre. It's considered suburban residential. Goal 8 from the growth policy is to proactively plan and provide for logical growth of communities while protecting rural character and sustaining county resources by guiding development to areas most suited for it. And objective 8.3 of the growth policy is to guide new subdivisions and development to areas that have the least impact on natural resources and are most suited for development. So the area is unzoned, and while it is recommended at a density of 1 per 5, the state law, MCA 76-1-6052, details that a growth policy is not a regulatory document, and a governing body may not withhold, deny, or impose conditions on any land use approval or other authority to act based solely on compliance with a growth policy. So that basically means that we're not allowed to condition or deny, withhold any development based solely on the growth policy recommendations. I should say zoning is our regulatory tool for controlling density. This is the proposed plat. I've highlighted the proposed house site and the existing house site. Lot 13A is to the south. So lot 13B is proposed to have this house site and the driveway leading up to it. It will have a well on lot 13A to serve lot 13B. And while no adverse impacts were found to public health, safety, and water and sanitation, I did want to provide some clarification because I know it was a point of concern for some. This project requires sanitation review per Title 76.4 of the MCA. They're required to submit a grading and drainage report, a water and sanitation report, and a DNRC letter of predetermination. And the final plat approval for the subdivision is pending full sanitation approval, including DEQ approval. A lot of this prep work has already been completed by their consultant. We reached out to agencies for comment. We did receive a comment from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. The residents of this lot should anticipate and mitigate any conflict with wildlife, and there have been recent grizzly bears in the area. So we are recommending, in addition to including the living with wildlife covenants in the covenants, a condition to use fully automated bear-proof trash cans for both lots in the subdivision. Northwestern Energy has highlighted a high pressure natural gas pipeline and a high voltage electric power line, and they just want to remind the owners to adhere to the conditions and use extra caution with any construction activity in these places. And we have added a condition to add that to the covenants as well. Air quality is in support of the covenants. They recommended edits to section 7, which have been updated. Public comment was sent out in the mail to adjacent property owners within a 300-foot buffer. And we received 8 responses to date. We also received 1 response to the project posted on Missoula County Voice, the county's engagement website. Generally, objection to the subdivision has centered on an opposition to an increase in density, a preference for lot sizes that are not smaller than 2 acres, and proximity to nearby dwellings, basically crowding. There was some concern for water quality and if there was room for the systems that are proposed. Some folks were concerned with adverse impacts to wildlife and wildlife habitat, and there was a written statement and a petition signed by neighbors opposed to the proposed subdivision submitted. We did have 2 neighbors respond that they have no objection, and we had 2 neighbors that responded in support of the subdivision and did express a preference for their names to be redacted from the petition that I mentioned. We received 1 comment off of Missoula County Voice, kind of echoing the general concern and wishing to not set a precedent for this type of development in the area. So some of the conditions of approval that I mentioned, we will ask that a condition of approval is to require bear-resistant garbage cans at each of the residents to mitigate potential impacts to human wildlife conflict. We would like to condition requirement of a statement be added to the covenants to mitigate potential hazards related to these high voltage and high pressure utilities mentioned by Northwest Energy. And to ensure legal and physical access to Lot 13B, a condition of approval requiring the construction of a driveway to the edge of Lot 13B, meeting the requirements for unobstructed access to emergency services is required prior to final plat approval. The easement does show this unobstructed access and a turnaround, but we would like to condition that the driveway is built prior to final plat approval. I just noticed we need a plat note correction, literally on the way over here. So we have the standard plat notes conditioned, including the RSID and SID waivers for public improvements and fire sprinklers. Excuse me. But there needs to be a correction to the SID RSID plat note that mentions Road A, Frenchtown Frontage Road. It should be Hampton Drive. This language was pulled from a recent subdivision nearby, and I do apologize for that. So staff is recommending approval based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law. And here is the recommended motion, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Would the applicant or applicant's representative like to present? Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you. For the record, Ken Jenkins with Montana Northwest Company. I would like to thank County Planning for working with us to get to this point in the review process. I don't have a whole lot to add. I would like to maybe just spend a little bit of time on the growth plan aspect of this. So as it was already stated, Hellgate Pines #1 and #2 both were in existence prior to the growth plan being enacted. I don't have an explanation for why they would drop a growth plan over the top of these two subdivisions that contained, as I recall, a total of, I don't remember, something over 50 lots, maybe 80 lots, something like that. Most all of which were already under 5 acres. I remember there were 15 that were around an acre in size. I wonder if part of the rectification of that issue was the inclusion of the activity circle. And within the 2018 update, it explains within the activity circle that lot sizes and densities would be driven by sanitation. In other words, whether or not you can get approval for on-site water and sewer. I would report that in this case, the only thing that we're lacking on that DEQ approval is the minutes from this meeting. And then that approval would be issued. I suppose relative to growth plan compatibility with the neighborhood, again, there are many lots under 5 acres nearby. There's a subdivision immediately adjacent to the east boundary of what we're proposing that is a carbon copy of what we're asking for here. And that was approved by Missoula County in 2002. And that's pretty much it. I think that we're in agreement with the conditions of plat approval, and I would be open to any questions if you have any.
Okay, thanks, Ken. We might come back to you for questions in a minute, but to kick things off, let us begin here in the courthouse in the Sophie Moise room. Is there anyone who would like to offer comments on this proposed subdivision? If so, come on up to the mic. It looks like the microphone is on, so come on up, state your name for the record, and please keep your comments succinct to 3 minutes or less.
Hi, my name is Mike Williams. I live on Hampton Drive, just a few homes down from where this is proposed subdivision. And I had a chance this year after we got word of this to contact everybody on my street, everybody on Hampton. And without exception, everybody was against subdividing this property. They all stated that they liked living there. The reason they live there is because of the open lots and the wildlife and the space that it affords without having any people so close. And because of our the way these power lines go through the length of the subdivision, it forces the folks on Hampton Drive to have their homes to the front of the lot, and the folks on the other side have to have their lots way to the back because of the other power line. So you start putting another home in there, and it really crowds the folks on the back side. So it's really a detriment to their and basically, like I said, I interviewed everybody, and it's on the petition on the entire block, and nobody was liking this subdivision. We just don't want to see it get divided up anymore. Thank you. I'd urge you guys to vote against this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Additional public comment?
My name is Lee Tangadol. I'm here to oppose this subdivision. I start by, got to clear up a couple errors. Laura, you stated that they were 1.3 acres apiece. No, that's not right. One of them is 1.7, the other is 1.02 acres of the subdivision. Mr. Jenkins stated there was 80 lots in all. That can't be right. There's 34 in addition to, and there can't be 50 some in addition 1. However, addition 1 is quite different than addition 2. We would like to be considered because we are a distance away and we have been different through our time period. He says there's a carbon copy to the east. Well, to the east is the Tura Estates, and all of those lots are 6 acres or more. So that's hardly a carbon copy. He was probably thinking of the Pinewood addition to the north. I guess it's northeast. And we had a battle on that one because it was first created as 1 acre lots. And we went to the county attorney and had that changed. And on their plat, it says every lot has to be 2 acres in size. And if that was on every plat, every lot in our subdivision, we'd be delighted. We'd rather have the 5 acre according to the comprehensive plan, but 2 acres is good. We fight against the proliferation of 1 acre lots because once it gets going with the price of land right now, anyone who buys property is going to want to offset the cost a little bit. And if this passes, you've got yourself a model where you buy the lot. Some lots can't be subdivided, but a lot of them can. And you're going to create a model where you will split off a piece to help recoup the high cost of buying the property. I've lived there 47 years. In that time period, I mentioned the 2 subdivisions. The trend in those 2 subdivisions is towards larger lots, not smaller lots. And we also have fought the fight to prohibit the proliferation of 1 acre lots. Within the subdivision itself, there are 2 changes, only 2 over the time period I've lived there. There was 1 lot that was split in 2000. We did, there were 2 adjacent landowners protested, but Commissioner Evans and Carey voted in favor. Commissioner Kennedy voted against. The owner of that lot stated that she wanted to subdivide that lot in order to provide a home for her elderly father. That was platted in 2002, and to this date, no house has been built on that lot. The petition that Laura mentioned, we have signatures from 30. Oh, let me state, right now there are 34 lots in addition to. In 1972, there were 2 lots in addition to. There was 1 split and 2 lots were joined. So the total number of lots is the same. The average lot size in addition to is 1.96 acres.
And Lee, you're running a little bit long here, so if you could wrap up, please.
Okay.
And if anyone has additional written comments that they want to leave with us, they can certainly do so.
You know, you're balancing property rights versus the rights of the public or the will of the public or the danger to the public. That's your job. It's a tough one. And we think 1 acre lot crosses that line in this subdivision. The trend should be larger. The comprehensive plan states that it should be 5 acres, and the Supreme Court or Montana court says that there should be some coherence or compliance to that rule. There's 2 of us that have houses right next to this new subdivision. We used to look at deer and trees, and now we're going to look at a house. Now that's not going to break anybody's heart but ours, but it does kind of destroy the reason we all live out there. My well happens to be the 100-foot isolation zone, happens to be within 10 feet of the drain field and the mixing zone for the new lot. I imagine it satisfies the law, but it's something I'm going to worry about. If nothing else, I just have to know who to sue when my well gets contaminated. I'm sorry I went over. I have a habit of doing that. Thank you for your consideration. I urge you to vote against this subdivision.
Thank you. Additional public comment, come on up.
Hello, my name is David Luke. That's my house right there that y'all have highlighted. I purchased the previously subdivided lot, the lot that Lee just mentioned that was platted in 2002. I purchased the lot in 2015. I targeted the Hampton Drive subdivision because of how dispersed the homes were in the area. It's quite obvious that we have neighbors, but we're not all on top of each other. And that's fantastic. If you want to live on top of one another, plenty of space to live closer to town. In the time that I have owned my house right there, there have been many occasions where I wish the lot had not been subdivided because the front half of the property is owned by someone else and is not used, but man, I sure wish that I could own it myself. I wish I would have had that opportunity. I, much like Lee, urge you to oppose this. I don't think I have much else to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Additional comment?
Commissioners, my name is Don Halverson. My wife and I own two lots, lot 20 and 21, which is west of lot 13, of course. But it's also downstream from it, and that's my point. I've been at pipe trades all my life. Water flows downhill. I'm very concerned about water quality in the area. We've had hardly any snow this year. I don't think there's going to be any more coming to speak of. I'm worried about water quality. I know that you folks have had issues in the Sealy Lake area with nitrates flowing into water supplies. That concerns me very much. Out of the 34 lots there, 30 of the respondents were negative. They didn't want this to be built. I agree with everything that's been said by the other gentlemen who are opposed to splitting this lot. Of course, I'm also opposed to splitting this lot. Like I say, what's going on with the climate change, and whether you agree with it or not, it's there, I believe. It's not going to get much better in the years to come. It's going to affect water quality. It's going to affect all the people that live in that development right now. So I'd ask you folks to vote no on the splitting of lot 13. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson. Anyone else? Come on up. Don't be shy. Okay, while folks are collecting their thoughts in the room, is there anyone online who would like to comment? And if so, please use the raise hand function. Bonnie.
Hi, I voiced my opinion on the Voice website. I was the
And
one
Bonnie,
that
sorry
stated-
to interrupt. Could you state your full name for the record?
Bonnie Roberts.
Thank you.
I live on the piece of pizza. They're on the corner of Tura and Hampton. And so that's kind of nearby. I didn't really get a letter because I guess if you don't live next door, you're not informed. But I live on just a little bit over an acre. And I definitely don't want to see people going, oh, I think I'll split my lot. And before you know it, all the deer are gone. And I'm concerned about how much of the water level. I mean, most of our wells are not 100 feet down. They're only 30 something feet down. And the more people that move out here, the more the water's being used. And I also thought about the concern about where are the leach lines going? And yeah, I know Lee, and I would be concerned about living on the backside of that property too, because where all the runoff from your sewage, where does that go? If he's got a well nearby, that is a concern. So I agree with everyone that's there. Please do not do this to our neighborhood. I realize that progress and development needs to move on, but please don't make it in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Anyone else online or on the phone like to comment? Okay, is there anyone else in the room here in the courthouse who would like to comment? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Questions?
Sure.
Josh.
Oh, do you want to go
Yep,
first?
Well, I have questions for
oh,
John Hart, but I
okay,
bet you and I have the same questions. Go
probably.
ahead.
So Lee said something super astute. You were right on when you mentioned private property rights. And we are in a very strong private property rights state, and we abide by those laws. We have a pretty specific decision space. I mean, when we have the opportunity to give a thumbs up or thumbs down to this, we can't do it because we don't like it. We can't do it because the neighbors don't like it. We can say no only if a specific set of criteria is not met. If there are impacts that are unfixable, and hopefully I get the legal language right, can't mitigate them. So there's a specific set of criteria that we have to show that if this subdivision happens, there's going to be a big impact on this criteria, and it's so big it can't be fixed. So what I'd like to do, if you're okay, if you can bring that list back up and we can work through them. We can just go criteria by criteria and we can see. Because you guys are put a very moving, powerful argument. If I was in your shoes, I wouldn't want this either. But we can't legally make a decision based on that.
I'd be happy to do that now, or
Yeah, please do.
And I just
bring
wanted
those
to
up.
clarify, sorry to bring up your property. I just wanted to clarify the comment about the subdivision to the east was actually this one. This was platted in 2002 and it is similar. But without further ado.
Head, Laura. Okay, walk us through the criteria, please.
Sure thing. So I already spoke a little bit about the zoning and the growth policy.
Do you mind just saying it again?
Sure. I already mentioned the criteria for the zoning and the growth policy and our limitations with the land use designation from the growth policy. Basically, that can't be the only determining factor for a denial. And there is no zoning here, so that would be our regulatory tool to restrict density. And the second criteria is effects on agriculture and agricultural services. Subdivisions are required to reasonably mitigate potential significant adverse impacts to agriculture and agriculture water user facilities resulting from the subdivision. There's no current or historical ag use on this property and no adverse impacts to agriculture or agricultural water facilities found. There are several criteria for effects on local services, one being roads. There are no roads proposed with this subdivision. There's one additional driveway proposed. Pedestrian facilities, there's no sidewalk, curb, gutter, non-motorized facilities. Minor subdivisions aren't required to include these. But there was a condition of approval to add a note to the plat about a waiver of petition to a future SID or RSID if that was ever a possibility to include those improvements for public benefit. So we did not find any adverse impacts for roads or pedestrian facilities. Water and sanitation systems, I spoke a little bit about. They will have to comply with local and state regulations and have already begun much of this work. And
so is there a potential that the developer would interact with DEQ or with our local health department and they would say, oh, you can't, this failed the perk test, or this ground isn't big enough to accommodate a drain field or something like that?
So they've been in contact with the applicable agencies and they've received pre-approval from DNRC and DEQ, and they will need to finish that approval process before they're able to be approved for final plat.
And then as part of that approval process, I mean, is the neighborhood assessed in a sense, because folks were concerned about the water quality and water quantity? how's that determined?
Not being a
Sorry.
expert on the subject, I don't know for sure that the entire neighborhood is assessed, but I think groundwater, drainage, all of that is reviewed. So, yeah.
And John Hart, since what we're talking about here, and this would be a separate DEQ review, separate review process called sanitation and subdivision review, and that's different than what we were talking about today. John, do you happen to know what sort of public involvement occurs during that process, since we're not typically involved in that?
I should, but I don't know what kind of public process is involved with that. I would note, though, that in the staff report, it says that there's already been a non-degradation analysis performed, and that was submitted with the subdivision application. And I think that non-degradation analysis shows that the additional sanitation system that would be necessary for an additional dwelling has been shown not to have an impact on water quality in the adjacent area.
Okay, Tim
quantity.
Worley from staff, and I think I saw Karen.
But yeah,
Hughes.
my colleague Karen has some comments too. This is actually the DEQ public hearing. The notes from this hearing, well, it's a consideration technically, but go back to DEQ regarding water and sanitation issues.
Okay, so this is the time to comment on that. Karen Hughes, did you have anything additional?
No, sorry, commissioners. This is Karen Hughes with Planning Development and Sustainability. Tim said exactly what I had in mind.
Okay, thank you. Juanita,
No, John got it. Thanks.
okay.
Sorry, Laura. Okay.
Oh, no, not at all.
Recreation in schools.
Yes, so yeah, no adverse impacts to services such as law enforcement, schools, fire. These agencies are reached for comment. Minor subdivisions are exempt from parkland dedication, so there's no impacts there. I mentioned the agency comment from Fish and Wildlife. So the possible impacts involving potential conflict with wildlife will be mitigated with the recommended conditions. And another condition is to maintain the weed management plan in the covenants. There are a few with public health and safety. So this was reviewed for floodplain, does not contain any FEMA floodplain. It was reviewed and received DNRC predetermination for groundwater. I mentioned the pipelines and power lines that will be mitigated with the plat note and the addition to the covenants to use extreme caution in these areas and observe any covenants associated with the utility easements. Draft covenants note Missoula's having a high radon potential and contain a statement recommending all residents should incorporate radon resistant construction features. That is included in the covenants. The subdivision is located outside of the Missoula County air stagnation zone. So all these together are to say that we did not find any adverse impacts to public health and safety. And this subdivision proposal complied with the requirements of subdivision review as per state law, including the seal of professional land surveyor and engineer on the, well, it will be required on the final plat. So this proposal will meet those requirements, and it meets the requirements for MCA 76.3 subdivision regulations.
Thank you,
Yep.
Laura. Additional questions? Josh or Juanita, sorry.
That's okay. Explain again our decision space, John.
So it's always a little different from one land use request to another, but when it comes to a request for a subdivision, the criteria for local government review is exactly the criteria that Laura just went through in some detail. Your obligation is to review the subdivision proposal for specific, and I'm reading from the statute. This is what the Montana legislature has said is your decision space.
And folks, this is Deputy County Attorney John Hart.
You're supposed to look at these primary criteria and look for specific, documentable, and clearly defined impacts on those criteria factors. And if you find specific, documentable, and clearly defined impacts, then you go and say, can those impacts be mitigated? If they cannot be mitigated, then you have a basis for denying the subdivision application. But as you've heard, the record before you is that there are no impacts to those primary review criteria, and thus there is, or to the extent that they are, there is mitigation. For instance, the grizzly bear resistant garbage cans, that can be mitigated through that requirement in the covenant. So I know that the residents here don't want to hear it, but you don't, the record before you doesn't provide a basis to deny this subdivision application, in my humble legal opinion.
Thank you. Additional questions? I guess I would just say, and folks here for this item might be getting a sense of where this might be headed. Ultimately, it's the Z word, folks. It's zoning. That is the regulatory mechanism that would determine and regulate density. Short of that, the growth policy that has been cited here today does not carry the regulatory force that I think many folks here and across the county might like it to. So zoning is the ultimate path forward if you're not wanting this to set a precedent.
I'm just gonna guess here that for most of you who really don't want to see this, this one more house might not be that big a deal. But if other lots that are larger than an acre and could accommodate 2 drain fields, they want to subdivide, and then the next one and the next one, then the whole complexion of your beautiful neighborhood has changed. Completely empathize and sympathize. Following on what Commissioner Strohmeyer said, the answer to preventing that from happening is to zone it at 1 per 2. That's then that density and zoning are linked. And right now this area is unzoned. And this subdivision didn't show unmitigatable impacts on any of these criteria. So there is no legal space for us to say no, and we can't just say we don't like it or the neighbors don't like it, as much as that would actually be personally gratifying. That's not legal. It's not right. But I would encourage you, if you want to make sure your neighborhood doesn't get chopped up any further, to look into zoning, and then you could actually control density.
John.
Another option, I don't want to give you legal advice, but you've kind of galvanized. Sounds like 30 out of 34 of you come together to say, hey, we want to keep our lots exactly the way they are today. You guys can all put restrictions on your own piece of land, saying this land cannot be subdivided, and that's a way to maintain the neighborhood character too. You know that you're all going to rely on each other to do that on your own individual property, but that's another option that you could all discuss.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Tim, can you mind if I ask you this question? So if these folks were interested in pursuing zoning, what should they do?
I think at first they need to figure out amongst themselves and get a consensus as to what kind of land use they're thinking about. Is it a 1 per 2? Is it a 1 per 5? And then once they get that kind of consensus, they could approach our office and at least begin conversations about how to zone.
Okay.
The challenge at this point is it's an older growth policy document that we're working off of, something that really dates to the mid-70s. And our office is trying to move the conversation forward for maybe updating the growth policy that would include other areas of Missoula County, possibly including this area. But I think maybe the start is for them to have their own conversation about and get a consensus as to what that density is within their neighborhood. And then they could approach our office and then we could take it from there.
Thanks. If anybody wants to get contact info from Tim, please do. Sir.
Okay, come on up to the microphone and only qualification, please keep it succinct.
Don Halverson again. I read an article in Missoulian Monday about similar issues you're having up in Sealy Lake with nitrates flowing into wells. And I understood it right, and I wasn't part of the discussion. I don't know what you've all done with this issue, but it said that you were willing in the Sealy Lake area to deal with these on a case-by-case basis. Why can't that apply to us?
So I think the big difference up there is that our health department has identified real water degradation and has created a special management area that has some tighter restrictions on development in that area. In the case at hand, there's no information that we've received yet from DEQ that would indicate that there's water quality degradation in association with this parcel of land that we're talking about today. That might come forward during their sanitation review process, but that's the big difference between your neighborhood and Sealy Lake is there's documented water quality degradation in the Sealy Lake area. And we're not going to get back into a bunch of back and forth here today, but
I'm
go
done
ahead.
after this. So unfortunately, and I realize in this case, what you're telling me is there's not much you can do. And unfortunately, nothing can be done until the damage is already done. And that's what concerns us.
Thank you, Mr. Halverson.
DEQ has pre-approval, but has yet to approve this. So
okay, sir, we'll give you one last bite at the apple, and this is going to be it.
Scares you when I come up here, doesn't it? We go overtime. 2 points. The degradation report isn't my bailiwick, but there are errors in it. Where they put septics and wells on my property is not in the right place. Now, this is for the cumulative effect. Also for the cumulative effect, it never mentioned the current house has a ring system, a seepage system, and for cumulative effect, that seems like it would matter. I grasped at the mixing zone and pointed out how a 2-acre lot would have a longer mixing zone, which would run right into my well, and I'm sure the DEQ looks at that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Laura, would you mind bringing up the motion again, please? All right, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the Nelson Minor subdivision based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law in the staff report and subject to the recommended conditions of approval as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion amongst the board?
And I hope the neighborhood takes opportunity to organize and assess what you want for your future.
Okay, we have had a motion, a second discussion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and please do tie in with our planning staff because I think there could be a possible path forward. Unfortunately, it was not available to us today for this proposal. Our next public hearing, which we will, this may be is this a continuation? We've been talking about floodplain for so long, I've kind of lost track. So come on up, Matt Heimel. This is related to the Floodplain Hazard Management Regulations Amendment.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Matt Heimel with the Missoula County Planning Development and Sustainability Department. I'm a planner and the County Floodplain Administrator. Before I jump into a short PowerPoint, I just have a brief introduction on this. So today is the final hearing on a resolution to adopt amendments to the Floodplain Hazard Management Regulations. And this action is occurring as one of the county's commitments under the National Flood Insurance Program. And to simplify how that works, under the National Flood Insurance Program, it is essentially a partnership between the federal government, states, and the local communities. And as part of that working relationship, the Federal Emergency Management Agency will map, study, and determine flood hazards. The local community is tasked with regulating those flood hazards and establishing regulations that are compliant with minimum state and federal standards. As a component then, the federal government makes flood insurance available for property owners or renters in any part of the community, whether or not it's within the MAP floodplain. The federal government can also make available funding for mitigation projects. And as part of regulating the floodplain, the local community will reduce or minimize adverse impacts of development within a flood hazard area. So that is why we are discussing amendments to the floodplain regulations. So I'll share my screen here, then I have a few brief slides. Okay, so to summarize where we are, these amendments are being required by the State Department of Natural Resources and Conservation and Federal Emergency Management Agency, or DNRC and FEMA for short, respectively. And the reason that these amendments were initiated is that last fall, floodplain maps for the Clearwater River were finalized and adopted by the federal government for insurance rating purposes. The Clearwater River regulatory floodplain is from the extent of the outlet of Celia Lake to the inlet of Salmon Lake. So with that update to the floodplain maps, the state and the federal government authorized a two-phased approach to updating the county regulations. The first phase was simply to update the reference to the floodplain maps, just the date and map numbers. The second phase is what we've been discussing throughout the winter, during a public hearing on January 11th, and today on the 22nd of February. And in the past several years, there have been some updates to the model ordinance prepared by the state that has several definitions and policies and procedures for floodplain management, and also several definitions at the federal level, most notably a requirement for elevating accessory structures and agricultural structures. So to demonstrate our continued compliance in the National Flood Insurance Program, Missoula County was required to update the regulations to reflect new language at the state and the federal level. So as shown on the slide, we've had several meetings, some public notice, and today we are at the last step. So the resolution for your consideration today has essentially three components. One, we implement the state model ordinance, and that is a reformatting of our regulations essentially to meet the organizational layout that the state uses. That will help in case we need assistance from the state to help with, for example, maybe a substantial damage assessment in the wake of a flooding event, or if we need to have future updates, it'll be more streamlined. Second, complying with federal code. As noted, there are some updates to definitions, such as clarifying that maintenance activities cannot exceed the scope of previously approved obstruction in the floodplain, and having new elevation requirements, as I said, for accessory structures and agricultural structures. And the third part is we're clarifying some existing policies and procedures. And in that, I mean that Missoula County has some higher regulatory standards. So the state and federal governments set minimum standards for development in a flood hazard area. And federal law actually encourages and defers to any higher standards that a community will implement. For example, elevating a house on a stem wall foundation, looking at properties in a shaded X flood zone, or requiring compensatory storage if someone is adding fill in the floodplain. All those elements increase the degree to which we mitigate adverse impacts in a flood hazard area, and they also work for us as part of the community rating system to lower flood insurance rates for anyone that has to pay flood insurance or chooses to pay flood insurance in Missoula County. Right now, we're sitting at a Class 7, which reduces flood insurance rates by about 15%. So this agenda item had a staff report attached, draft regulations. On January 11th, I went exhaustively point by point through some of the key changes. I'd be glad to go over any of those if needed. I do have a draft motion available. Oh, and I should also note, we did not receive any comments on the draft amended regulations, although we can still take comment today.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience here in the courthouse who would like to comment on this item? Is there anyone online who would like to comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Questions or a motion? Do we have a motion?
Bring up some motion language.
There we go.
There you go. All right, I move to approve the resolution to amend the Missoula County Floodplain Hazard Management Regulations, implementing the state model ordinance, complying with federal code, and clarifying existing policies and procedures based on findings of fact and conclusions of law as presented by staff.
Second, and real quick, Matt, what was the date of effectiveness again?
They'll be effective on March 25th, 2024, which is a Monday.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Matt, for slogging through this for quite some time. Okay, our next public hearing is actually the second hearing on a request to approve a resolution to adopt AGRR-2 zoning for the Rossetti property at 9399 Barron's Court. And when she gets set up, we will have a staff report from Jenny Dixon.
Thank you for your patience. This is, as you mentioned, a second hearing on adoption of a resolution to rezone property at 9399 Barron's Court. On January 4 of this year, the commission voted unanimously in favor of adoption of resolution of intent to rezone. It was published in the Missoulian January 20, second publication January 27, pursuant to state law. Requires a 30-day period during which people owning property within the AGRR2 district that this property is within along the Highway 93 North corridor, about a mile north of the Y. We did not receive any comments from anyone owning property in AGRR2, and so I have a recommended motion up on the screen to adopt the final zoning resolution for the property.
Excellent. Would the applicant or applicant's representative like to say anything if you're either here in the room or on the line virtually?
I don't think they're
here. Okay. Is there anyone who would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Questions or a motion?
I have no questions. I move to adopt the final zoning resolution to rezone property located 9399 Barron's Court, legally described as parcel 72C, certificate of survey number 2339, from AGRR5 to AGRR2.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, Jenny. And our final public hearing today, and this is the item that I mentioned, there would be some additional description of the process, which deviates a little bit, or it doesn't deviate so much as it's a little unique, and we don't come across this too often. we will be convening as the Planning and Zoning Commission rather than the Board of County Commissioners for our work today. And I'll say up front that we are not going to take action today on this item. Our action will be moved to April 4th, and this will provide us time as the Board of County Commissioners to review all of the comment that we've received to date, the comment that we'll receive today, and also give us an opportunity to go out on site and actually take a look at the property itself. So before we get going, I would like to recess as the Board of County Commissioners and reconvene as the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I will let either Jenny or John Hart describe, for those of you who don't know, what the heck the Planning and Zoning Commission is and why we are doing this today.
So the Planning and Zoning Commission is a creature of the citizen-initiated zoning process. There's two different ways to zone property, county property. One is through citizens that live in a particular area, has to be 40 acres or more. They come together and they say, yeah, we want to enact zoning regulations on our property. They bring a petition to the commissioners, and that is heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is made up of, by statute, it's made up of the 3 county commissioners, the Director of Public Works, and we have Shane Stack, our Public Works Director, online today, the Clerk and Treasurer, who is Tyler Granat. Mr. Granat was not able to make this meeting. And there is also supposed to be 2 citizens on the Planning and Zoning Commission that are citizens who live in a citizen-initiated zoning district. Missoula County has struggled mightily to keep citizens on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have not been able to cajole anybody to serve on that. So if there's anybody on the line here or in the room today who has interest in being on this commission, let Cheryl Hartman know, or any of the other administrative staff for the commissioners know that you're interested in that position, and you would that would be welcomed. So we don't have the 2 citizens. We have 4 individuals today. Mr. Stack and then you 3 are the Planning and Zoning Commission who will hear this today. Hopefully by the next hearing, we will also have Mr. Granat.
So again, the way it will work, we've opened up the public hearing of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We will keep this hearing open until April 4th. The Planning and Zoning Commission that Mr. Hart just described will then make a recommendation. At that next meeting on April 4th, they will make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. And I get it, that's a little funky because we're making a recommendation to ourselves, but that's the way it's set out in state law. We will have our public hearing and then we will take action at that time. So without any further prefatory remarks, Jenny will provide a staff report. The applicant or applicant's representative will have a chance to present to us today. We will open it up for public comment and then we will again take action on April 4th. At the earliest, there's always the option that we would not take action then, I suppose, but Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just pull this up to share screen and show you some slides about this project. Let me try that again. Okay, here we go. Okay. Did I not? There we go. Yeah. Okay, so as you mentioned, this is a Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of County Commissioners hearing, which may not conclude today. And what I want to talk to you about in this presentation is some background information about the property and the project, some site description information, what the proposal is, and the zoning and the growth policy for the property, and then go over some agency and public comment and the staff recommendation. To begin with, the property is Western Materials, Inc., represented by WGM Group. They are requesting a use variance to expand their existing gravel pit. They submitted their application back in October with an original hearing scheduled for December 7, which was delayed until today. The primary reason given at that time was the applicant had just received some significant comment from not only Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, but also parks, trails, and open lands regarding impacts to wildlife. And they had also been receiving some comment from the area neighbors in the week or two preceding the December 7 hearing, and based on those two factors, asked for additional time to try to address the concerns. This is a use variance in a Part 1 zoning district. It's a planning, so it has the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners, which is very different than a Part 2 type zoning variance. The criteria for a variance in Part 1 allows the commission to authorize a variance under three, what I would call, it's all one sentence, but I break it out into three components. One is that the variance will not be contrary to public interest, and where owing to special conditions of the situation, the literal enforcement of the decision of the commission will result in unnecessary hardship. And so just for quick reference, it's public interest, special conditions, hardship. Okay. The site, I'm going to give you a little bit of a site description. The existing pit is 80 acres on the east side, and you can see that here. It's composed of actually four or 5 acre tracts that have not really been touched yet. And then these 3 20-acre tracts here where the pit area, existing pit area is. And then you can see down here, this area is left untouched with a buffer to Maple Creek that protects the riparian vegetation and resources in that area. The request is to move the extraction operation to the west to these 3 20-acre tracts, and also these 2 5-acre tracts for a total area of 150 acres. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail in a few minutes that's the area of the boundary of the area, but it is affected by different proposals the applicant has asserted for mitigation, as well as just simple logistical constraints that you can't just mine to the edge of your property. So we'll talk about that in a minute. This is my best representation that I have of what's going on the site now, where the existing pit is, and the details of this I don't think are I'm not going to dive into them right now, because I think the applicant is going to address where different equipment is. But the gist of this is that the access points, there are no access points along the north, which is McLean Creek Road. And there are 2 access points, and perhaps even 3, along Old Highway 93 South. This diagram indicates location of berms as soil, so you can see those along the highway. There's a very tall berm here. There's some berms along the west side, and then there's also some berming along McLean Creek Road, and I have some photos I'll show you in a second. So this is the view that, and it was, it's Highway 93, so I had to I was on the other side of the highway, took a photo across of the image that we all, I think of when we think of this gravel operation. Once you get interior to, off the highway and onto McLean Creek Road or the other roads in the area, this top photo is showing the berm along the west side of the property from McLean Creek Road. And so you can see right here, this is the house that sits on one of those 5-acre tracts. And what you can see there is the only evidence that I observed in this photo or from on the site was the pile that did exceed the height of the berm there. This is the lower photo is the berm that's along McLean Creek Road. The one with the vehicle is just to give you scale is the height of the berms along Old Highway 93 South. And the one on the left, also with the vehicle, is to give you scale of the 30-foot tall berm along the south side of the property adjacent to the residences on Cunningham Court and Maple Road, I think it is. And then this is the west berm nearest the residential area. It doesn't run along the residential area, but it's what you see right now if you stand on the property line of the pit and you see this. This is how they intend to berm in the future with like this style and the other styles that I have been showing you. Of course, when I get to the recommended conditions of approval on this, one of them includes weed management plan approved by the weed district. And so we don't need to worry about weeds at the moment. But I did want to show you just a few more views. This is the one on the left is up on top of that 30-foot tall berm, looking toward the residential across the field there, kind of in the middle of the photo. And those are the homes along Cunningham Court. And this is the opposite where I went to Cunningham Court and took a photo towards the pit to show you what you see looking from the homes. This is, if I go back to this photo here, which I'm gonna just show you, that is basically right here. This is turning around and looking at the homes south of the proposed expansion area. So, and you'll see some, I should have probably just taken a panoramic, but I didn't think of it at the moment, but this is the same building as this. So these are this is kind of a tree buffer along some of the homes at the end of Maple Lane. You can see some of them. I'm not sure which homes these are, but this is the boundary between those homes and the area of expansion. What I want to talk about in a minute is the proposed separation that the applicant is asking or requesting with this approval, variance approval of 300 feet, and I'll show you that in a minute. So the proposal is to, as I said, expand into the areas of red and yellow. Current operation is shown in green. They need a use variance from ZD 40 to do that. One of the things that I think helps is to see this visually, and this is submitted by the applicant to show two different scenarios. One is if the variance is approved, or well, in this case, scenario one, variance is not approved. And we're going to get to scenario two is if the variance is approved. Scenario one has two images. One is what will it look like during mining, and what will it look like post reclamation. Under the assuming current zoning doesn't change, which allows residential at 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. And so if the variance is not approved, these 70 acres over here will likely develop as 5 acre tracts. And that would be 14 5-acre tracts right there. The mined area would then include these 5-acre tracts on the north part where they have not yet expanded. So with 66 acres mined, I estimated this area shown with the hatch to be about 75 acres where they would mine. And then at reclamation, of course, reclaiming that area to be allowed to be developed as residential, to allow some additional 5-acre tracts for a total of 30 on that 150 acres. So that's what to expect under current zoning. If the variance is approved, and this is just to show end result on the land, given the proposed mitigation, which includes 2 300-foot wide buffer strips along the south property line right down here and the north property line up here. Those provide a couple of different functions. One is just separation from adjacent residents. Also to keep distance from the 2 creeks that run south of the property here and actually cross the corner, and then McLean Creek, which you can start to see right up here, and it runs here, and just giving enough space from that. The mined area would then change. Instead of about 75 acres on this east side, it would go westward and encompass about 96 acres. And that's because the proposal is to then not mine these 5-acre tracts to the north, and instead allow them to develop as residential while still maintaining a wildlife buffer. And upon reclamation, a 40-acre developable area shown here with the homes on the south ends of those 5-acre tracts, and then the remaining 25 homes in this area that's not hatched. And so the end result, if the variance is approved at post reclamation, is 110 acres in permanently protected open space through a development agreement. And that includes this wildlife corridor up here, and then the developable area of 40 acres. And I'm presenting this now in the order of this slide presentation now, because I want you to be able to have this in your mind as I talk to you about why they're proposing this, and what led them to go in this direction, and the concerns that were raised by agencies. So we'll get to that. Just briefly, the zoning regulations for this property, which is right here, is ZD 40. We have about 35 Part 1 zoning districts throughout the county. They each have their own regulations. This one is a residential zoning district, and it contains language about the intent to be residential. It also contains language of non-conforming uses may not expand. That is why they're requesting a variance to that section, and to allow that use to expand onto the western 70 acres. The growth policy calls for residential use in this area. This is from the 2002 Lolo plan, and that plan was essentially mimicking or replicating what the zoning said the property should be used for. And so that's why you see that designation there, that the zoning was 1/5, so the plan reflected that. Adjacent to it, as you go up the hill, 1/10, and then you get into open and resource area. I do want to talk about agency comment. And so these are some maps that were provided by Fish, Wildlife and Parks. But before we get to the details of these maps, I want to note that in mid-November, Parks, Trails, and Open Lands expressed some concern about impact to wildlife corridor, wildlife movement, wildlife habitat, and in particular referenced a 2023 study by Sarah Sells et al. At the university that really had to do with predicted wildlife movement, and that the likelihood of, and these maps reflect this, these are from FWP, show the site is this little dark triangle. This is female grizzlies. It doesn't matter a whole lot, but female and male grizzlies have a medium to high predicted use of this area. I think, no, I didn't do it. I had intended to include an image from our property information system that shows the space between Lolo and Carlton Creek. And that's where this is. And maybe I can, here's, so there's some residential development north of this site where there's less likelihood of wildlife movement because these are bigger open tracts. But as you get across the highway, you have these smaller 5-acre tracts. And so one of the other areas that Fish, Wildlife and Parks was looking at as a potential corridor crossing is a little further north where there's actually open lands on both sides of the interstate. Now, Randy Arnold over at FWP said they don't know where it's going to go. There's just, you know, a lot of research and discussion about it, but there's definitely nothing for sure. And so what the proposal, the scenario 2 is trying to do is to accommodate the possibility that if there is a crossing, they're leaving that area open for that potential use. Before I get to public comment, I just want to hit a couple of other things. The property is also within white-tailed deer and elk winter range, elk winter range. Where is it? There we go. The other agencies that commented on this, aside from PTOL and FWP, had no adverse comment on the proposal, and that includes Air Quality Program, Public Health, Public Works, Five Valleys, Audubon, and I think that might be it. So public comment, we Western Materials did a neighborhood meeting in mid-November when they thought they were on a December schedule. We did our notification back then, and once the hearing was delayed, we had to let everybody know, don't come on December 7th for the hearing. We're going to have a new date. So let folks know through Missoula County Voice as a primary way to connect to our citizens, and also sending adjacent property, well, we call them adjacent property owner letters. It actually went to all the property owners within the entire zoning district and to 600 feet beyond that. Normally, we just send to people 300 feet from the subject property. So we really wanted to make sure everyone in the district was notified and beyond. And we did get a lot of comment through email, mail, Missoula County Voice. We received 2 petitions, and there's some material in the packet that talks about the petitions signed by 109 individuals representing 54 households in Missoula County. Staff is recommending approval of the variance request. I do want to talk about not only the expansion planned. The current pit right now has another about 20 years to its lifespan, and while there may be some that's where the significant activity is going to occur. They said they may need to do a little bit of work expanding to the west just to be able to move equipment around. But the significant portion of gravel extraction will remain within that current 80 acres. And in approximately 20 years, when they expect the current source to run out, they will start expanding to the west if this variance is approved at a rate of about 200 feet every 5 years. And with that, constructing berms as they go. So not necessarily constructing berms now, only as they start to move westward, if approved. So with all of that information, including and later in the condition, I'm going to go through the conditions of approval, one of which is related to groundwater. This is one of the few pits I'm aware of in Missoula County that will not dig into groundwater, and in fact, by DEQ permit is required to stay 10 feet above groundwater level. So we are with the recommendation of approval, we are looking to see a development agreement filed binding upon the applicant and their successors, which apply at the time of expansion to those tracks. So if they take 20 years to expand, they don't have to do anything relative to the conditions until they start to expand into that area. So really nothing may happen for a while. By making it a development agreement between the owner of the property in Missoula County, we then have the ability for some enforcement. And the development agreement would require berms to be constructed to a minimum of 6 feet tall and subject to weed management, and designed to maintain site visibility at all intersections. And I showed you some photos of what those berms could look like. Condition related to dust, track pads shall be installed at the front of the scale to keep dust to a minimum. The access drive to the scale must be paved, and the pit operator shall continue to hose down the site as required by the DEQ permit to reduce dust. Traffic safety, I think this might have been done already, have stop signs installed for trucks exiting the pit and include warnings that traffic coming from the north of Old Highway 93 could be traveling at high speeds over a hill and may require extra time for safe traffic movement. Noise, all vehicles owned by pit operator and subcontractors equipped with white noise backup notification devices, and I believe this has also been done. Conditions relating to hours of operation, and I'm going to leave the details about this to the applicant to present, or if someone has questions, but not changing much. And the DEQ permit would need to be revised to accommodate these hours. There's some bit of strategy, as I understand it, to these hours, so that trucks that are coming to get loads in the morning are not in conflict with 8 a.m. Or 7 a.m. Commute traffic. They're trying to either beat that traffic in advance, like at 6 a.m., or have trucks out of there at 4 before commute starts at 5. There may be some opportunity for some nighttime operations where they would let us know, and then we could let residents know. Processing equipment. All structures must be set back 100 feet from Old Highway 93 South, and in no case can they move any further south than their current locations. And also, no new equipment or structures would be placed within that western expansion area. So it would all stay within the current operating area. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jenny, explain that again. So just the mining happens going west, but the facilities and equipment, vehicles,
Yeah.
everything stays in what it is currently.
Right. Concrete crusher or gravel crusher, concrete plant, washers. Yeah.
Okay,
Those would all
thanks.
stay. They would not be allowed to go in the westward expansion, and they cannot move any further south than they already are. The 300-foot buffer and wildlife corridor, which I showed you on some previous slides, basically that depiction of during mining and post reclamation become binding upon them through this development agreement. It does allow chain link fencing along the perimeter for safety reasons, but not in the areas of the wildlife corridor to allow, they can do wildlife friendly fencing in the wildlife corridor, but not, 8-foot tall chain link. Okay. Makes that development proposal binding with the 150 acres total, allowing 40 acres of development area and 110 acres permanently set aside. And then we just talked about the fencing in the wildlife area. I mentioned at the beginning, the DEQ permit requiring, and also now through condition of variance approval, if approved, to not allow any mining into the groundwater, and then finally getting all other necessary permits. So I do have I know you're not planning to take action today, but this would be the motion that staff would recommend for the Planning and Zoning Commission of approval, subject to the conditions that I just covered. I do want to make one, I think I skipped over it as I was heading into the conditions of approval. We did, as I said, we got a lot of public comment, and I've read through every comment and summarized the kind of, it's a lot of comments. So I wanted to summarize it for you. And so I'm going to hit 4 or 5 points that seemed to come up quite a bit. And then, of course, for people in the audience, they can certainly reiterate or add to. The comments really, the opponents' arguments really seem to focus on that the proposed expansion violates the existing zoning regulations, which was established to protect residential areas from industrial activities like mining. They also raise concerns about the detrimental effects of the expansion on the environment, including air and water quality, wildlife habitat, particularly for elk migration, and increased noise and dust pollution. The increased truck traffic from the expansion poses risks to public safety already on an already congested highway like Old Highway 90, US Highway 93. And I wouldn't say it's congested, but has some high-speed movement. Residents fear that the expansion could decrease the values of their property due to visual pollution and the presence of large-scale mining operations nearby. And the expansion could lead to obstructed views, additional plant equipment, increased hours of operation, more employees living on site, and impacting the surrounding community's quality of life. And so taking all of that comment into account and the analysis that we've done through our findings of fact, came up with the conditions of approval to try to mitigate these concerns. There may be opportunity for additional conditions. If you hear additional concerns expressed, we can always do that as well. And with that, I will end my lengthy presentation. Thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Jenny, Jamie, do you want to come on up? You and anyone else with WGM or the applicant?
Yeah.
It's all yours.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for your time. My name is John Kappas. I'm the president of Western Excavating. I've been working with Western Excavating since 2017. Western is a family-owned business and is part of the company first started by Bill Mitty over 50 years ago in this community. Now in its 3rd generation ownership, when Kevin Mitty recently, in the last 2 years, transferred the ownership to his son, Riley. The company maintains its long-term focus on looking to how to help the community meet its building needs into the future. And when I talk about the future, You know, we're talking about 50 years into the future. And in my mind, that's kind of tough to foresee what that's going to look like. And so what I'd like to do is take a step back and go 50 years in the past and look at what this community has done. So if you'll take a mental tour with me, if you were here 50 years ago, you'll know exactly what I'm seeing. And if not, I will try to explain what we were seeing. And I'm going to take us back to that Mullen Road intersection at Reserve Street. And what's important 50 years ago there is that's when that bridge was built that crosses and connects Reserve Street to Mullen Road. And so as we're standing there and we're looking to the north, what today is building after building after building and stoplight, the whole Reserve Street that's built there, that was just a farmhouse and empty fields. As we turn and we look, and I may be turning the wrong way, so please don't hold that against me. I'm not quite sure where we are in the building. When we turn and look to the west, we see Walmart on Mullen Road. That's not there. None of the buildings are there. It's actually farmland all through Mullen Road. And actually, at that point in time, only 11 years earlier, my mom actually graduated from Hellgate Elementary, and it was a one-room schoolhouse with only 8 kids in that graduating class. And today, that campus is almost as big as the University of Montana's campus, it looks to me. So a lot has changed just in that area. So as we cross the bridge and we go down Reserve Street, we remember that that was a 2-lane road down Reserve Street. And it was 2-lane all the way out to Lolo. Can you imagine today if that was 2-lane? I mean, we're having troubles with 4 lanes, and we just, had that accident last week that shut it down almost the whole day. So then we go further down Lolo, and where all the houses are from south of Lolo to where we're going to turn off there at Trader Brothers on Old Highway, it's just 4 large ranches. The Schraders, the McClays, and on those ranches. We make that turn off there at Trader Brothers, and that turnoff had just existed for 5 years because that old highway was the only mode of transportation. We had just built that new highway between Lolo and Florence and made the old Highway 93 in 1970. And so we look at what that 50 years, how much has changed. And yet that's when this zoning was being contemplated. And at that time, this resource was being used. This resource was used for that highway. There was a pit to the east of Old Highway 93 that has since been reclaimed. And that, as we continue west, we're into that same resource. And so as we look at how important that resource has been for us in the last 50 years, we are at a critical point where we can say, do we need to have that resource for the next 50 years for what we're going to see in this community? And I'm not suggesting we want to see this kind of growth. I have no control over that. But one thing I do know is that all that infrastructure we just took a tour on is now aged. And all that infrastructure needs to be maintained. It needs to be replaced. It needs to be upgraded. And the city was there when we were standing there 50 years ago with other infrastructure, homes, buildings that were 50 years old at that point. And all of that needs to be replaced and updated. And so this gravel resource is going to be needed. And as I'll talk about, it's probably even needed more so today than it was 50 years ago because of the limited resources we now have in the Missoula Valley. Because a lot of those pits that would have been there that we would have seen, they've since been reclaimed. And a lot of the gravel that was available, a lot of the land that was available has now been built on. So thank you for taking that tour with me and remembering what the community looked like, because that's what we have to think about as we're looking forward on what this resource means. So I think now I'll jump into kind of the details about this gravel pit. Did we have this?
Yep.
Oh. next slide. Thank you. This slide was already, it wasn't this exact slide, but we already discussed, so you kind of have a reference point here. The F section is where our current gravel extraction is out of, and that's 80 acres, 66 of which is bondable. The section A, Western Resources or Western Excavating Resources owns section A, which is 20 acres. Section B, C, D, and E are owned by the Leibenguth family. And when they came to us and were discussing how this would be developed in the future for houses, and saying that it's probably time to do A, B, C, D, and E as a development, we thought it may be an important time to present this to the community and see that this is an option, that we have a point in time where we can either build more houses on a gravel resource that we've been relying on, or take an opportunity to further that gravel resource into the future. As was taught, if we can go back to that slide, as was mentioned, in our current footprint, we figure we have about 20 years left of gravel. We will continue to mine to the north. The floor in the gravel pit can be lowered. It's in different sections right now. And so that will give us about 20 years. When we initially filed this application, we were asking for all of the A, B, C, D, and E to be mineable. And by looking at that, we were able to estimate that the resources in that section would add another 56 years. But as we'll discuss in detail, some of the concerns that we've had, and we've heard the concerns just recently, we have changed our application. And so our net expansion is only going to be 30 more acres than what we currently have. While that's going to reduce the amount of gravel extraction from the original application, it will still provide a significant amount of resource in the future with approximately an additional 35 years. Now, some of you might be going, wait, that math seems a little weird. How do you lose 57 acres of expansion and only 38% of the years? Well, most of the acreage we're giving up for mitigation is to the north, the E and D, and then the other 4 5-acre parcels. Those parcels are sitting on a clay lens, and we're not quite sure the depth. The depth of that clay lens is going to be at different levels. And so we're not going to be able to mine those as deep as we can mine what we currently have and what we currently have if we're going the west A, B, and C. So slide 3. So then let's look at what's extracted from this pit. Not all pits are created equal. Not all dirt is created equal. The specifications necessary to meet the standards of Montana Public Works and Montana DOT specifications require material that has components that help make the construction, I guess, last longer than what we've seen of other materials that have been used in the past from other pits. The other thing about pits is some pits can have material that's good for concrete, but not good for road base. They might have material that's good for road base and asphalt, but not good for concrete. This pit is unique in that it actually has a very large upper end of rock, all the way down to the sediment, the fines that are needed for sand and creating road base. So I'll go into these real quick. Pit run is used as a first layer of like a parking lot. It's structural. You don't have to process it at all. It's just what comes right out of the bank. That pit run then can be used, like I said, for structural purposes, or it can be turned into all the different types of aggregates we see here. Chips are used in asphalt. Road base is used because it compacts. Drain rock is used for sumps. And then, of course, sand you see used for baseball, concrete, and horse arenas, amongst other things. And like I said, this pit allows us a resource that provides the aggregates, all the aggregate that is needed for any kind of projects. This resource was used for the Highway 3 build and expansion and more current uses as far south as Hamilton for their school, their fire station, and the VA, the Stevensville School as we start moving back up the valley, the Florence School, roads and houses throughout those neighborhoods and throughout that valley. It's been used on the most recent Lolo school build. It was used on the county's bike path from Lolo to Missoula. It's in miles of streets for street repairs, water and sewer replacements. It's at the VA. It was used at the hospice, and it was used in the most recent Mullen build for all the gravel for that project. Now, in addition to the aggregates, you've also heard that the pit also has concrete and asphalt plant locations. There was a bit of concern raised about cement plants, and I'd like to address this a little bit. So concrete is a composite that's made up from several materials, one of which is cement. To be clear for the record, cement is not produced at this facility. The two terms cement and concrete are routinely used interchangeably by people, but they're not the same. While related, these terms refer to two different materials and two different methods of production. If you mix cement with water, you get cement paste. Then you add sand to that paste and you get mortar. Then you add larger aggregates, up to 1-inch rocks, and you get concrete. So cement is a component of concrete. And what we have at the Lolo plant is a pit is a concrete plant. It is not a cement plant. The cement is the powder. It's delivered in an enclosed truck and is put into an enclosed silo. The aggregates, the sand, and then the cement are mixed with water in our mixing trucks. And then that concrete is delivered to construction sites. Now, cement production, that is, which is not done here, that is what creates high CO2 emissions. They come from the chemical reaction of firing calcium carbonate in the kiln, because those kilns have to be heated to a 2800 degrees. It also uses up a lot of fossil fuels. And so that's why you get the CO2 emissions from those cement plants. So our concrete plant does not create the emissions that you would see in a cement plant. And for both our concrete plant and our asphalt plant, they have to meet the Missoula County air quality standards, and we have to get a permit for that. Stack tests are done on our asphalt plant to assure that that plant is meeting those specifications. One thing I will mention is that the asphalt plant is we've had an asphalt plant there in the past. It is currently not at the Lolo site. It is currently at the Mullen site. So there's been some concern, if we move the asphalt plant, do we increase the trucking and the processing at the Lolo pit? Because we do see that with Reserve Street getting as crowded as it is, to keep asphalt and concrete in spec, there's a need to have it come out of the Lolo pit as well. But if we move that asphalt plant back to Lolo, we currently produce all the aggregates out of Lolo for our asphalt plant, and we truck those to Missoula. And so instead of trucking all that aggregate, so we won't have to produce more aggregate for our asphalt plant, but instead of trucking the aggregate out of that site, those trucks will just take the asphalt out of that site. Next slide, please. So why here? What we're seeing throughout Missoula County is the aggregates gravel is becoming a limited resource. There aren't a lot of places left where you can mine. We've built most of our good gravel, if not all of it. Over the time of our tour, specifications for building have become more stringent as well. And that has also flowed over into aggregates. We actually, in 2018, we had a gravel pit. We call it the Buffalo Pit. It was behind where all the buffalo were as you're going into Lolo. And those gravels no longer were able to meet the specifications. So we reclaimed that pit in 2018. And so that Bitterroot rock in the Bitterroot drainage is not as good a quality as we see in the Clark Fork drainage, which is unique to the Lolo pit because it's not river rock. It is actually an angulated rock that came off the mountain in some way, shape, or form when there were glaciers. I can't take us back that far, or I would, to see it, but it is not river rock out of the Bitterroot. And also other companies are facing this problem as well. Knife River, their Wheeler pit, that's where they do their base material, road base, and also for their asphalt plant. They're now hauling their aggregates in from Tarkio. The plant on Mullen Road, that's used for the two concrete plants, our concrete plant and their concrete plant. While it still has resource, it too has a limited life for providing concrete aggregates. And as we have to start trucking from further out, trucking is an added cost to all of us for construction. All the homes we build, all the buildings we build, the infrastructure we replace, that would add additional costs. You heard about the topography of this site. We call it a bottom-up extraction. We don't have to sit on the top of the surface and mine down. When you have to do that, what you do is it's more difficult to mitigate vision, sight issues, more difficult to mitigate dust, mitigate noise. And so as we sit down in this below and mine into the banks, we are able to better mitigate the kinds of issues you see at other mines. Now that was apparent. These meetings have been great, I have to say, that we've had with the neighborhood, because we've heard concerns and we've been able to address some of those concerns immediately that we saw. I guess we weren't seeing it the way they were, and that input was very good for us to change. And one of those was that northern parcel. There's some infrastructure running in some power lines that run in the ground, so we can't mine into the bank. So we had to get up above and start mining down. Well, what that did is it really became apparent that if you have a pit that is being mined from the top down, our gravel pile, large gravel pile, was sitting up high, and the wind was catching the dust off that. The noise from the crusher wasn't being mitigated from the walls, so that was going through the valley. And that really identified to us that, one, this bottom-down approach does benefit the community and the neighborhood. And two, it's why when we talk about the mitigation of why we gave up those acres, not only was it beneficial for the wildlife, it was also beneficial that we don't have to mine in that way on those particular acres.
And John, are you getting close to wrapping up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because I think the rest of the items were covered. So with that, I'll pass on to Jamie, and she'll touch on some of the mitigation we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Jenny, I may be running through some of these next slides a little fast, just because again, you've touched on some of it and John did as well. But so John had mentioned this bottom-up extraction method and how beneficial that is, not only to the community for views, but also for noise. And the other thing that they have right now are the berms that Jenny had mentioned. Those also help reduce views and also keep dust to a minimum. Those berms are normally seeded. There was a period last spring where, or excuse me, last fall, where they were not seeded, and before the planting time, if you will. And so there was some dust coming off of those berms at that time. But going forward, the intent is to seed those and keep that dust to a minimum. Next slide, Jenny. I think we hit on this one. This here is just a couple more views of the bottom-up excavation as well as the topsoil berm in the background. And then the soiled berm there that will be seeded this spring. Next slide. There's a picture of a berm that is planted with the native grasses. And as Jenny mentioned, those will be continue to be sprayed for weeds. Next slide. Okay. So we did host the voluntary neighborhood meeting on November 15th. As John mentioned, that was very helpful for us in also amending the application, but also just him as a company in general. We do appreciate all of those comments that we did receive. And while we may not completely satisfy everybody, we did learn of the most pressing issues that the neighbors had. And through that, we will demonstrate how we were able to mitigate that. Go ahead, Jenny. So one of the main concerns was dust. And in general, the overall air quality. So John talked about how we're required to have an air quality permit, but in addition to this, we would create one continuous berm along the active area of resource extraction at a minimum of 6 feet tall. In some locations, like Highway 93, for instance, those berms would be taller. The berms will be seeded to reduce the topsoil blowing off, and track pads, as Jenny mentioned, those will be installed from the scale to the main road. The pit operator will also continue to spray down the pit as required by DEQ to keep the overall dust down. With this and the overarching air quality permit, we will maintain healthy air quality levels as required by DEQ and the local health department. So, go back real quick. So just to note some of the mitigating things that Western has already done with concerns to dust is paving that access drive, regularly seeding the berms, controlling for weeds, and continuing to hose down the site as required. Okay, go for it, Jenny. Next concern was traffic safety. So there was a general concern for increasing the number of vehicles that would access the pit and then the traffic that exits the pit. And at one point in time, there was a stop sign internal to the operation. However, that was removed at some point in time. Since then, Western has put that stop sign back up. They have also placed a white stop line on the asphalt pad. And then this expansion is not actually going to require any additional increase in traffic because, again, we're not expanding the operation of the pit. It's just expanding the excavation area. Keep going in interest of time. Next was the zoning and the concern that this is a residential zoning districts and the impacts to it. So it's a unique situation where the zoning district did not recognize the specific use as a gravel extraction, but the land use designation and the land use plan also have not recognized resource extraction generally within the plan itself. The overarching county growth policy does mention gravel extraction and the need for it to continue as homes and infrastructure are built out, and that we need that as a resource within our community. Zoning districts are also not static. They can change in time over time. That can be initiated in this instance by the community that live there, or it can also be done through a variance request as we are doing now. Typically, the variance requests are more site specific rather than affecting uses within the entire district. We did contemplate doing an amendment to the entire zoning district, but opted to do this site specific change instead so that it only applied to this specific property in question. So zoning in part 1, as Jenny mentioned, it can also be conditioned. And with that condition, we would develop the development agreement with the commissioners and planning staff to better mitigate not only for the locals within the community adjacent, but Missoula countywide. Next slide. Noise was the next concern, and it's centered around the activity on the site operating outside of normal business hours. And John had explained some of that, and the reason being is that they're trying to avoid the commuter traffic that happens Monday through Friday. So trying to get on the roads and to a job site prior to your 8 a.m. traffic and back to the pit prior to the 5 p.m. traffic returning home. And think other things for noise that we will be doing is the backup beepers will be changed out to white noise beepers. And Jenny actually had a really good YouTube video within her staff report. I hope you had a chance to listen to that. If not, please do before the next meeting. And it shows what that sound is compared to the normal loud tone that's just So great video. Thank you, Jenny.
Could you do that for us again?
No, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. I think that hits on that. Okay, next one. The next concern that we heard was decreased home and property values. So, and the main concern was the visibility of the pit. This pit, as Jenny was showing in her pictures, it's hardly actually visible from the neighbors, especially to the south, even from the east along Old Highway 93 because of the berming that has happened there. And same with the west side as well. These berms are going to help block the view of the pit. And then that bottom-up excavation is also going to help reduce the visibility of any extraction that is occurring on site. Next slide. So here is just two different depictions. The one on the left-hand side is the general area of the properties south of the pit, and on the right-hand side are the properties north of the pit. This is taken from Zillow, and it just shows homes recently sold within the area. So as we can see here, homes are selling in this area. They're being bought, and generally they're within the market range of staying on the listing for 1 to 3 months. Next slide. So here are some estimated values, again from Zillow, that just show that these properties are retaining their value. This is fairly comparable for what we're seeing throughout the Missoula Valley. Next slide. And here is a depiction of the area north of the pit in that general same area that I had shown on the previous slide. Again, just showing and demonstrating that the homes are continuing to hold their value and they're not being adversely affected by this gravel operation. Next slide. The photo on the left here, that is the Knife River and Western Pit out on Mullen Road. As you can see, that is directly adjacent to residential homes. It is also near what they are calling the Sutupkane area. There are large developments planned just to the northeast of the existing Western Pit. Again, just trying to show that residential uses and gravel operations can exist next to each other. These pits are unique in the fact that they also have mitigating conditions that were added through zoning amendments. And the same is to be said for the pit on the right-hand side, just north of Wheeler Mobile Home Park, and east of Canyon East, I believe it is. Again, just demonstrating that these gravel operations, they can exist next to residential developments and not decrease housing values. Next slide. Big game habitat. This was one of the primary reasons that we chose to hold back our application, not move forward with the December hearing, and revise our proposal and provide those wildlife corridors and actually restrict further development once reclamation of the pit does occur. Go ahead, Jenny. So here again is that revised expansion plan showing the 300-foot corridors on the north and south side of the property. In total, again, only adding approximately 30 acres of mineable area. And we're doing that in giving up some of the area that is already bonded to the north and moving that acreage over to the west, again, where we know that the soils and material within that area are better for road base and the pit run and all of those other items that John had described in the first slide. Jenny? This here is our post-mining exhibit. You've seen this before, but again, this indicates that we will be doing in perpetuity and keeping open space. It's 85, a little over 85 acres of reclaimed open space that would run with the land in perpetuity. All development would be centered on that 25-acre area, in addition to the 14, almost 15 acres where the additional 6 homes are. So next, Jenny had shown these previously, but again, this is the alternative option if it's not approved. And certainly don't want anybody to take this as a threat or a bad thing, but just knowing that if Western continues to operate, they will operate within the 66 bonded acres, and it's likely that the Liebenguse will sell and the adjacent land to the west will be developed at residential dwellings, 1 unit per 5 acres. This also does not guarantee that there's going to be any buffers in place. It does not require any berming. The berming that is in place now, that is offered by Western. It is not a requirement of DEQ, and the same is to be said about mining down into the water table too. That is also something that is just offered by Western as part of their existing pit or existing permit, but it is not technically a requirement of DEQ. So post-extraction and processing, the reclamation plan would look something like this. Again, just showing at development of 1 home per 5 acres, no wildlife corridors, no clustering of homes. In the end, we feel that the proposal in front of you today is actually better, not only for the community, the neighbors, but the wildlife as well. Again, just in summary, we do feel that there is a public benefit. The neighbors are getting some conditions that would help them be further from the excavation area. It would require that the equipment all stay in its exact location now. It could not go further south. The community gets a benefit in the fact that we would then have a resource for all types of construction locally within Missoula, and we would not have to truck it in from areas such as Tarkio like Knife River is doing now. The special conditions, this is quality gravel. We're in an area where we are able to do that bottom-up excavation because of the topography, again, aiding in the visual reduction to the neighbors, and the fact that Western Excavating has agreed not to mine into that groundwater table. As far as hardships go, it is a hardship in the fact that the gravel resource here is very minimal in Missoula anymore. And so we lack the ability to have existing extraction occur in town, and we are having to haul from outside. And if we are able to do so, then we're committing to only adding an additional 30 acres of extraction area and utilizing these resources to benefit the community. And overall, keeping expenses down because we're not having to pay additional costs to truck that fuel or to truck that material in, and thereby passing those costs off to the public, the government, all those agencies that utilize this resource. So with that, I believe we will close and allow for public comment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jamie, and thanks everyone for sticking out this long through a long afternoon of other stuff that you probably weren't here for. So let's get right to it. If folks would like to offer comment, and let's begin with individuals in the room here in the courthouse. Please come on up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and try to be as succinct as possible in sharing your comments. Come on up. Oh, come on. There we go.
Hello, my name is Emily Dabrowski, and I live at 19100 Old US Highway 93 in Missoula County. My home was not shown on any of the photos except for the Zillow listing, but my driveway is directly south of the current existing mine. A lot of my comments have already been submitted in writing, but I wanted to add a few more today after I've seen more paperwork and more data coming out of this. I'm here to request that the land use variance be denied. There has been a history since at least 2001, but since before that as well, where the existing operators of the mine did not adhere to our zoning, our community zoning. Pardon me, I'm a little nervous. From the years of 2001 to 2007, Stan operated the pit as if he had a permit and expanded it from the existing and approved 15 acres to upwards of what we're seeing today. So not only has the decision-making been irregular in the past, but I propose that it be revisited. All of those existing decisions be taken a look at and explained, quite frankly, including I would also like to see an environmental impact report that specifically addresses the elk. We have documentation from the Audubon Society and for grizzly bears, but I would like to see something speaking directly to the elk and that winter habitat. There's a herd of at least 100 elk that pass through my front yard and directly onto the mine most days of the winter. Our current zoning has language in it that says any existing non-conforming use shall be limited to their present size and not allowed to expand in any form or nature. The initial owner of this mine was part of those decisions. He was there 50 years ago when that community initiated zoning was put into place. And he continued to flout those regulations over and over again until selling it to Western. Pardon me. Up to three times the size that it has been allowed. Trust has been broken by this continuous expansion without proper zoning enforcement. And I would like to know how we can uphold these current regulations and know that Western will be upholding them as they continue to move forward with the pit. If it is said that there is at least 20 more years in the existing operation, start there. Start with what we already have without needing to expand it. Thank you, guys. I hate speaking in public. I really appreciate you
Okay.
all.
Thank you, Emily, for your comments. Anyone else like to come on up?
Hi, good afternoon. Liz Haney, Heaney, 20,002 King Road. Well, a lot of the comments I have already documented online. I did want to mention that WGM presentation about their application pointed out some of the deficiencies of the paper trail that exist within the Missoula County departments. And I would like to request that a formal paper trail be documented and corrected, what needs to be corrected. It appears that residents were not notified. Did not receive notification of an asphalt production. We did not receive notification of concrete production. And the bond area, well, just with all of these missteps in the paper trail, I think there's been a miscarriage of justice to both the residents and to the business owners. But had the county upheld along the way what residents feel they should have, we would not be where we are today. It's an opportunity for the county to correct this and show that the righteous thing can be done. We welcome new residents in our neighborhood. That's a more healthful environment for us. I oppose the variance to be expanded, for the pit to be expanded. The variance should not be granted. I think for the health reasons, all of the other reasons that everybody has stated, but also because of what appears to be misappropriation of the paper trail and the incorrect parties or departments making those approvals. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Liz. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Jim Herstein. I live on Cunningham Court, the northernmost house on Cunningham Court, right next to Emily. I commend this last speaker. I really think we do need to know what happened, how this was expanded from 15 acres to 75 acres. I lived there in 2009. Nobody said anything about what was going on. Stan just broadened it. And now we want to double it again. I do want to thank this commission for their openness of this. I want to thank Western for going through the process this time rather than just expanding it. But my concerns are for the traffic, for the wildlife. And I also want to point out that just south of Emily's driveway is a riparian area. And it just seems like there's more danger there to that and to the air quality than the folks who have looked at these things and said they're not going to make any comment have done. So, and I would also invite you, when you come out for your tour, stop by some of our houses and see what we see from there. There are berms, but it's not invisible from where we live. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
I've got one on the phone here. You can hear me.
If you could, caller, if you could just wait just a moment. We've got someone else at the podium. After she goes, we'll get you in the queue.
Yeah, my name's Jan Harris. I live on Maple Lane, which is just south of where the pit is going to come. Right now, they've got 6-foot berms that had been promised to be seeded when they first bought the pit. It's knapweed city. I have never seen any seeding there or any of the native grasses that the pretty pictures have shown. It is solid knapweed that just blows right into our properties. The other thing is a 6-foot berm when they've got a 50 and 60-foot pile of material standing up there in one of the windiest areas in the county is not going to stop the dust. Dust does not go in a linear pattern anyway. It swirls. That area is known for having a north wind come in and it switches to a west wind and it switches again. We are inundated with dust. The other thing is they've got the concrete plant sitting down next to the wetland. There's a pipe, drainage pipe that goes from the concrete plant area straight into the wetland. We have contacted Army Corps of Engineers to see what the replication of it, that's not the right word, but what the problems that can be caused by washing out trucks, grounds or water spillage from the concrete, how that's going to affect that wetland, because that wetland is our aquifer. That is our well water. We are all at the same depth in our wells as what that wetland is. So there's a lot more riding on this. And I agree with the last two people that have spoken. This pit should have never gotten to where it is right now. It was grandfathered in as a 15-acre pit and no homeowner has ever been notified that a permit has been granted. We have not been, we were never notified that the asphalt plant was coming or the cement plant. Everything has been kept under the table in top secret. We don't know what to do. If this zoning variance goes through, is it going to just be more of the same? Are we going to just keep, well, you know, we'll just creep out a little bit until it's in our front yard? You know, this is super important to all of us. And I know money talks, but you know, John Kappa's story about the big open fields and one farmhouse really doesn't sound that bad to me. It's a lot better than looking at an ugly gravel pit. So that's my.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Caller on the line who was trying to get in earlier, feel free to jump in, introduce yourself, and share with us your comment.
Sure. I apologize for not being able to be on at site on person, but I'm up on King Road. My name is Dan Monroe. I've been a community member here for 17 years. I'm about a mile southwest of the pit where I live with my family. I'm looking up at the elk herd, as a matter of fact, right now. I have the advantage of being able to type some ideas down, whereas everybody in the room just has to jump up in front of people. So I have a bit of an advantage here, perhaps. In respect to the zoning variance that the commissioners were talking about, I believe this argument is not consistent with your previous discussion you had regarding a subdivision that did not have zoning. You decided to approve that subdivision because the community didn't have zoning. But in our community, we do have a legal agreement which says basically that there can be no further significant industrial growth in our community. So in my opinion, you'd be doing an end round of our legal agreement by ignoring the existing legal document that we have. Why do we continue to ignore zoning in our community and yet enforce it in others? My second point is, I think it's ironic and disappointing that several of our neighborhood roads in this community are poorly maintained and basically mud roads. Sun Valley, Carlton Creek, King Road. John Kappas had a wonderful presentation. He sounds like a great businessman, but he talks about the fantastic quality of the aggregates that other neighborhoods in Missoula County benefit from, but why not our neighborhood? Our taxes certainly warrant paved roads to our homes too. I'm looking out at the window again at the elk herd. And I think it'd be shocking if we'd risk this incredible natural resource and the calving grounds and by degrading it and narrowing the corridor that the animals have to get to the river. If any of you folks have outside of the community have turned north onto Highway 93 by Trader Brothers, it's an extremely dangerous intersection already. You have to pull out. Steady traffic coming out of Missoula and going into Missoula throughout the day. With the additional truck traffic we already see, it's very difficult and very dangerous. Oftentimes foggy conditions. For us to be doing anything other than making our neighborhood and the community members safer is just criminal. So it would be something to think about. I don't know if we need to put a traffic light in there or not. But I certainly appeal to the commissioners to not approve this expansion. I think it'd be a real detriment to our community. So thanks for your time and your service.
Thank you, Dan. And maybe what we'll do is alternate between in the room and folks online. I do see another hand up online, but first, is there someone in the room that would like to come on up and introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Eugene K. Shepard of 6686 Sun Valley Road. Lived at that address about 30 years. Thank you for this forum, the opportunity to give an opinion. I imagine there's a world where this doesn't happen, that you just get what is forced upon you. So I appreciate the opportunity. I don't envy the commissioners that you have to sit there and listen to someone, try to tell you that let's dig an enormous hole in the earth and it's a beautiful thing. The virtues of destroying nature, how it's it's the way to go in life. And I do not envy you have to sit there and listen to that. I grew up about 100 miles east of here and born and raised there. One time it was the site of the largest Superfund designated area in the United States, when I was growing up there. And industrial, they tell you everything what you want, what they think you want to hear, what they want you to hear. And it's only about one thing though for industry, it's profit. Get the money and get out of there and let the suckers who believed you all along deal with the mess when you're gone. That's exactly how it goes. And so that's one of the biggest things that I think we need to be cognizant of here. Second thing is this is settled law. I've heard I've looked at it. I'm not a legal expert, and I haven't gone into any documents or anything other than what has been posted related to this. But in all indications are this is settled law. That because an entity within our community that has some sway decided they want something, then it seems like this situation is already set to yes. Let's see if anyone can come up with a way to turn it to no. Why isn't it start out as no? It feels like it's already slanted towards yes. So I feel like settled law, and if this is everything that's the zoning that's in place, if we can't trust that, if that's just has no teeth to it, what good are any of our agreements? Is this another broken treaty? It feels like. And then my kids are all grown, and I could look the other way on this. I could just put the blinders on and just say, well, I got what I wanted out of this. I sent my kids to the school and all that. But I drive by that pit every day, and when you see it every day, you get a complete understanding of what you're actually looking at, and it's not a great thing at all. This is hogwash, is necessary? Yeah, there's many things in our society that aren't awesome that but we need. But the truth is, this is not a pleasant thing to be near, around, or unless you're after profits, then it is something that probably people like. But as far as, I think a huge issue to look at, and for me, it holds the most weight in this argument is the wildlife. When I heard that the Fish and Game was relatively sure that the area where we're talking about expanding into was likely to be used by mother grizzly bear, that's huge red flag to me. I think you're, tread lightly in that. If you're going to rip a giant hole in the earth where, something like a grizzly bear is going to wander through expecting to find what, she needs there. This is not hypothetical either. If you, research Ethel the grizzly bear, I've tracked her. When all that was happening, I was watching where she was at, and it was within sight distance of where I live. She was in the trees. I never saw her, but that caller doesn't lie. She was right there, right where we're talking about. That bear walked right down the middle of Highway 93 through Lolo at 4 a.m. Nobody saw her. Pulled it off beautifully, but when she goes and then she goes back the rest of her journey, I'm sure that I just believe in the power of nature, that's institutional knowledge. If you're a grizzly bear, maybe passed on to, her offspring or whatever, but I would,
Eugene, you're running a little bit long, so.
I truly believe that there's more grizzly bears that we'll expect to find that, when in good shape, not with a huge hole in it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, looks like we do have a hand up online. Cheryl, who do we? Ben?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Ben Crocker. I own 18960 Maple Lane and live there with my family. I will share more direct fence line with the proposed expansion of the Western Excavating operation than I believe anyone else. I would say that they've been a great neighbor. The one thing I like is they only operate during, Monday through Friday. When we're not, there's never noise or machines operating outside of normal business hours. We have received no dust, no nuisance whatsoever from the existing operation. And I think Western's a very well-run company, very professional. Did I dream of having a gravel pit off of my fence line? No, nobody does. But, we're dealing a little bit with the NIMBY principle, the not in my backyard. We all need gravel. We all live in houses made built on foundations of concrete and drive on gravel roads, and it has to come from somewhere. I like their plan. I especially like that it doesn't include putting a massive subdivision in what is right now just an unused field that borders my pasture. I would much rather have, a little bit of industry there than have a neighborhood there, certainly. In regards to the wildlife, yes, the elk pass through there. Oftentimes they spend the night in my pasture or in what is now a vacant field. They typically don't stay too long. I see in the plan that there is accommodations for their movement, and sometimes they don't take that route. Sometimes they go through the pastures of what used to be the McClay Ranch. I I understand the concerns of my neighbors and respect them. But I would encourage you to come out and walk my property line if you wish and see what's really going on out there. Myself and my family, we've never considered them a nuisance. It's not wilderness area. It's just an unused, what used to be a pasture. And I think that once they're done with their reclamation plan, it'll be much nicer than it is currently. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Let's go back to the room here. And before we take any more bites at the apple, is there anyone here who has not spoken who would like to come on up?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tori Fort. I live at 18900 Maple Lane. So my husband and I have done a little bit of research since finding out about this expansion. And in 1993, Missoula County produced a zoning permit stating that this operation was not zoned residential. The zoning had been residential since 1976. To our knowledge, there was no public hearing at the time, as is required by our zoning statutes. All subsequent permits have been issued based on this one, and without the proper procedures to include the people most affected by these decisions. Now we're looking at expanding an already massive mining operation that's right in my backyard into proportions that should have never been allowed in a residential area. I, on the other hand, do have 3 small children under the age of 6. This is a very emotional time in my family's lives to think that this is what we're going to deal with. We are concerned about the water in the aquifer near the gravel pit. And my children play in a backyard next to where Western plans to set up a cement and asphalt plant that will billow toxic asphalt fumes, dust particles, and cement rock particles into the air that they breathe every day. The fact that they identified dust as a problem needing mitigation proves that this is a big problem and dust does not stay underneath the 6-foot berm. The common thing my 6-year-old son says to people when they come into our house, our guests, is if they know what a gravel pit is. He asks me about gravel pits now. It's become something that our family discusses a lot, which is something I don't want. Just another point of history that we found, the plan of operations in the 1993 contract that we got from DEQ records request, the gravel pit was shut down. The contract with the gravel pit was to shut down in the fall of 1998. That permit was for 3.5 acres, and the land was to be reclaimed. If that had been done, if Missoula County had followed what they had said in 1993, we wouldn't even be here today. Sorry, I'm just looking at the last things I wanted to say. Yeah, I want to say that I want my children to have a clean, a healthy, and a safe environment, which to me is granted in the Constitution. I believe that we should have this right. The gravel pit is not in the right location. We live in a great state with an abundance of land for extracting resources. This is not a hardship, in my opinion, for Western to find another location for their operation. In fact, I would say that it is something inherent to the nature of their industry, to be away from residents and out of the direct harm of people. So how do we get here? If the county had upheld the zoning at several points in time, this gravel pit would have been shut down. They should invest, Western should invest in finding another location. They said they have 20 years. They should invest in finding another location more appropriate for the nature of this business. The county has the opportunity to use the power their representatives were entrusted with by their voters to do the right thing. I implore that the commissioners move to not allow this gravel pit variance to go forward and to strictly enforce the statutes of ZD 40 and deny the use variance requested by Western. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Let's go back online. Is there anyone online or on the phone who would like to comment? Okay, Grant Keir. Mr. Keir.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My apologies, I had other meetings today, so if my testimony here is redundant to others, then please forgive me, but maybe I'll add to the case made previously if that's the case. I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge that on our work to try to support community efforts to add workforce housing and affordable housing across the county, a lot of what we've heard from the development community are the current and anticipated challenges of the cost and availability of gravel. And I don't imagine that there's many folks who want a gravel pit in their backyard, and I'm sympathetic to that, but we are facing real challenges with the availability of this product, and it's so essential for the roads and foundations of the very things we're trying hard to deliver at the most affordable rate. So forcing these resources to be further from the places where we're trying to consolidate housing and impacts would add to the cost and impact of delivering that kind of housing. And I just wanted to bring the awareness to the sort of broader economic challenge that's faced by trying to push these things too far away from the very places where we're trying to invest in that density and consolidation to create more livability and affordability. Thanks.
Thanks. And just for the record, Grant, are you offering comment as an individual or as a representative?
My apologies, Commissioner. I'm commenting today in my role as the CEO of the Missoula Economic Partnership. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here in the Sophie Moise room, anyone else who has not commented yet who would like to? Okay, come on up.
Hi, my name is Alice Tully, and I'm here sort of to a little bit of past history and a statement on behalf of my son. I lived on Mullen Road for over 20 years. I was there when that gravel pit was started by Hugh Frame. It was supposed to have been a very, very small gravel pit, and look what we have out there on Mullen Road now. For years, we fought to get berms built, to get trees and get mitigating circumstances so we didn't have to look at the gravel pit. Trees died, watering, there was always an excuse. But at any rate, my son now owns the property, and I just asked him to please, he's at work, and make a small statement that I could just read, if you will allow me.
Yes. And what is your son's name?
His name is Paul Tully.
Paul. Okay, very good.
He says, I grew up and still own the property at 5355 Mullen Road in Missoula, which is less than 7/10 of a mile west of Western Excavating's large gravel pit operation at 4685 Mullen Road. That gravel pit began as a small operation in the early 1980s, and assurances were made by the operator that it would be small and a neighborly operation. As the years passed and the operation was sold to new owners, the gravel pit grew and grew. Concrete plant, asphalt plant, etc. With that growth came more truck traffic, more noise, more dust, and more odors associated with an asphalt plant. And yes, that operation, like the proposed operation expansion that's planned for what we're talking about today, has weekday operating hours, but it starts early and ends late. And have no doubt, it is noisy, nearly almost a mile away, and winds often carry the dust and odor throughout the neighborhood. Gravel pits and their associated works are a necessity for local economics and infrastructure projects, but it is a balancing act between residences and businesses. That said, the neighborhood that they're talking about the expansion needs to be aware that while it's a small operation at present, the new expansion proposal will likely ramp up its operation considerably and become as large and busy as the Mullen site has been. That means increased noise, truck traffic, dust, and smells. I am sure that Western Excavating will say that they intend for operations to remain small, but the Mullen site was supposed to remain that way as well. As good neighbors and stewards, they intend to be there, but there is no way to keep a large gravel pit operation out of sight and out of mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tully. So let's go back online. Anyone online or on the phone who would like to comment?
Commissioner, this is Dan Monroe again on King Road. I just have just one quick question. I appreciate you guys staying late. If your legal counsel is in the room, I was just curious if he would answer, or he or she would answer the question, why do we have zoning at all if the commissioners can create a variance for a private enterprise to expand when it's explicitly stated that that's not allowed in our zoning? How does that legally happen? And what do we have as a community at our disposal to counter that, short of hiring our own legal representatives?
Thank
What's
you.
the point of zoning?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I will take that as a public comment and well, okay, our legal counsel is wanting to respond, so.
Thanks.
Zoning wouldn't be constitutional. Our courts have said for 100 years, one of the reasons that zoning is constitutional and doesn't violate people's Fifth Amendment rights to use their property exactly as they want is that by allowing variances from zoning, that is one of the components of a zoning regulation that makes it constitutional. So if we didn't have a process to appeal zoning regulations and ask for a use variance, the very process that we're going through right now, the entire system of zoning in our country would not pass constitutional muster.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the question, Ben. Here in the room, additional public comment. I see a couple people poised. Come on up.
Yes, hi, my name is Louis Harches and I live on Maple Lane also. First off, before I forget, I just want to refute a few things I heard here today. One of the things was I said the people to the south don't have a view of the gravel pit. I defy you to come to my house, look out my bedroom window and tell me that you don't see a gravel pit. Second, I heard a caller say that they operate within their hours. That's false. They routinely wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning with their backup beepers. We live in a neighborhood. I appreciate, 50 years of growth, what you didn't see out here in Missoula. But if you go back 50 years, you will see a neighborhood back where I live. And we came together, put zoning in place, citizen initiated for what we wanted. So that's some of the things I want to say. I can agree with the muddy road comment. Our roads are shit. Sorry, can I say that? Our roads are crap. And as far as the wildlife corridors go and all that, I can attest to a month ago, I counted over 100 elk just below the Cunningham Court. I have counted over 60 elk sleeping in my pasture. Grizzly bears, okay? You had your little dot up there for potential corridor. There's a reason why 2 summers ago, the first grizzly bear to be trapped in the Bitterroot Mountains in over 90 years was trapped in our neighborhood. These animals are going to have an impact. Now, if they operated within their hours that they said that they would operate in, most of us, it's an old neighborhood. We don't have central air. We rely on opening our windows at night to cool our houses down. That's why I get woken up by the machinery starting up at 6. If they're worried about their contractors and their equipment getting out before the rush, then they ought to advocate for a stoplight at Old Highway 93 and 93. I will agree. It is a dangerous intersection. I know people that drive 3 miles out of their way to Florence so they can enter the highway from the light. If they wanted to advocate for a stoplight down there, I'd be right behind them. I'd join their fight with them. And I think everybody in our neighborhood would. So I've been there almost 20 years. I don't know their property values. They didn't show very many houses for sale on Maple Lane in the time I've been there, almost 20 years. I only know of 3 properties on our street that have turned over, 1 due to death and 2 others. Family that moved in just here this last summer, 1 and 1 other property. So I don't know what it's doing to our property values. I can't imagine it's bringing them up by having a gravel pit there. I don't mind the gravel pit, but it was zoned and to be that small footprint. If you pass the variance, it's the people, the community, our community that loses. If you don't pass the variance, nobody loses. They don't lose either. Western doesn't lose. They knew what they were getting into when they bought that. It said they couldn't expand. So nobody loses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go online and then to the back of the room. Anyone online or on the phone like to comment? Okay, sir, come on up.
My name's Alan Foss. I live at the end of Maple Lane. I have been where I'm living today. I have had that property since 1966. The house we live in is the house that I built in 1966. In 1972, you folks or your ancestors, they okayed 5 acres per house where these people's pit is today. Stan Hendrickson started his little pit, 1 man, 1 little backhoe, 1 loader, and he never had a permit. I know this for a fact. I know Stan personally. Somehow he kept that pit going. And when we passed the zoning law, it was security. We thought that we would always have the zone. And then to find out now that Western Material wants to change the zone. They want to put in a cement plant. They want to put in a hot plant. They're hauling 50, 60 trucks a day out of there during the summer. And if they have cement and they have blacktop, that's going to double. We already have highway problems. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fosh. And just to be clear, contrary to appearances, I was only in the 2nd grade in 1972. So it would have been my ancestors in this position. Thank you. All right. Anyone online or on the phone? Okay. Anyone else in the room who has not commented yet? Come on up.
Commissioners, my name is Stefan Fort. I live on 18900 Maple Lane. If you allow me, I'll use John Kappas' words and take you on a tour. It won't go very far. It's just my backyard. I live 1 property away from at the south of the pit, and from my backyard, I see a gravel pit. That's what I see. That's what I can hear. That's what I can smell. And my young children can do too. Pretty soon, if this use variance is granted, we will see it, hear it, and smell it even more. The thousands of people commuting to Missoula daily will soon get to enjoy the enhanced view and smell as well. Gravel excavation comes with unavoidable nuisances. It is destructive in nature and causes severe disturbances to local natural resources, mainly to aquifers, which is what has the whole neighborhood very worried if this operation expands. Gravel is a necessity, I understand, but this is not the right location. Landowners in 1976 already expressed this opinion and had it written into law. It is time for the county to uphold that law and listen to the landowners who live in the zoning today. An overwhelming majority of the landowners within the zoning in question joined the petition against the use variance and would like to see their zoning upheld, which would be a first in regards to history of this pit. The benefits of the proposed use variance and expansion are heavily biased towards Western. No compensation is planned to mitigate the loss of enjoyment of the neighbor's property and loss in value. The only party who will be compensated is the seller at this point. Not even a study on the risks to water or air quality has been presented to the neighbors. No other option or comparison was offered to the public to understand the potential impact on gravel price and availability. We have to fully trust Western's word on that. Supposedly, Missoula County is running low on gravel resources, but no data was brought forward. The DQ permit states that owing to exceptional circumstances, hours and rate of operations can be adjusted and increased at will. I have recordings of activity as early as 5 a.m. and on Sundays. As far as I know, there was no published announcement for exceptional circumstances as of right now. At the pace Missoula County and Montana at large is growing, I fear that large-scale projects and exceptional changes in hours of operations and increase in production will become the norm, and all mitigations that were brought forth today will be voided. I therefore can only ask to not grant this use variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room who has not commented yet? And would like to, I should say. Anyone online or on the phone who has not commented yet who would like to? Emily, would you like the last word?
Thank you. I'm a nervous speaker. Emily Dabrowski again. I missed one point that I did want to make, and that it has to do with the land use that has been put forth in these proposals. And they're asking to expand the mining, but I have also observed while living right next door that there have been several employees or other people boondocking on the existing site and living in fifth wheel trailers and other trailers. And so I see this as a double dipping in this land use by having people living there as well as having an operational mine. And with that, in addition to the hours of operation, which I've also observed on the weekends as well as during the weekdays, is that I would like to ask who is in charge of monitoring and policing that and addressing that as that comes? Are we, the citizens, the ones who are going to be flagging this? And what's our path for addressing this as the neighbors in the community? So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. An excellent question that we will seek an answer for. Okay. Thank you everyone for sticking out this afternoon. As a reminder, we will be reconvening to take this up again on April 4th. At this time, we will recess as the Planning and Zoning Commission, reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners. Is there any other business to come before the board this afternoon? All right, seeing none, we will be adjourned. Thank you everyone for your thoughtful comments.